any of these wonderful social media platforms. And then just a reminder, there is that social media challenge where Fiveable will pay for your AP exam. Rakesh, no, we cannot see you. I just saw that message. So Fiveable will pay for your AP exam. That's what we had up on the screen beforehand. And tonight is night 5. We've covered all of our units, and we're going to do our massive review. This is our wonderful team again. Just as a reminder, you've met everybody, but I'm really excited that we're going to have, again, all hands on deck. All of our team members are here for you. So right now you've got Sean and I, and we're going to hear from Zoe. We're going to hear from Yoongi. We're going to hear from Amy. We're going to hear from Selena, Rakesh, and Christina. And we are so excited because whoever is not actively on stage with us will be up in the chat or up in the wing answering your chats, answering your Q&As. So make sure that you get active there. All right. This is our plan for tonight. Free response. We're going to start with another free response. We're really excited. We've got our lo-fi hip-hop music back for you. We're going to go through the 3 main things to take away from every unit. So we cannot, I want to make very, very clear that on night 5, there's not a feasible way we can talk about Rakesh is back and on main. Hello. There's not a way that we could talk about all of the content from every unit tonight. What we're going to do instead is discuss the 3 main things that you should take away from every single unit. And then again, pop any remaining questions into that Q&A tab and we will tackle them there. And we're also going to have an extended Q&A at the end of our session tonight. So we're going to get started with our FRQ stuff. I'm going to hand this over to Sean and Rakesh, and we will get jumping on that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the intro, Jenna. We are so excited to be with you. Night 5, we're going to leave you all feeling so confident to tackle this exam. I guess I'll probably say it for the first of a million times tonight. Remember, a number doesn't define you. But we're going to try as hard as we can to get you as high of a number as you can. So let's get right into it by starting with some FRQ tips. So let's just go over formatting of the FRQ real quick. Remember, you want to start with the term, follow it by a definition, and then you always need to apply analysis to that. You want to make sure that you name the people that you're writing about every single time so that the grader has no confusion about who you're writing about. And imagination is required to connect your answers to the prompt to hit that application step. But don't use imagination to an extent where you're just putting a whole bunch of fluff in there. The AP graders can see right through the fluff. They can see right through the extra add-ons that aren't really necessary. And you just want to focus on getting that definition down, getting that application in, and securing those points in as few sentences with as little time as possible. Cool, let's hop on over to the next slide. Cool, awesome. So we are going to get started right off with a practice question. So Brandon and his friends are surveying classmates for their AP research project to determine whether family income influences how many extracurricular activities a high schooler has. So the participants are provided with the study information, told that the survey is optional, and asked to provide informed consent. After completing the study, Brandon discovers that the correlation coefficient between family income and number of extracurricular activities is 0.91. Detailed results are organized and posted on a public website where everyone can see the names and responses from each participant. So now we're going to throw 2 parts at you. Part A, we're going to talk all about the research. So what are some of the ethical flaws of the study? Why are they an ethical flaw? And how could we correct this? Second, explain whether debriefing would or would not be necessary in the study. For part B, we're going to get into how do the following concepts affect the results of the study. So we're going to talk about coercion, we're going to talk about conformity, and we are going to talk about bias. So awesome. If we can hop over to the next slide, I believe we're going to walk through this answer with you. Rakesh, you want to talk about defining the terms? Oh, just kidding. You guys are going to take 5 minutes to define the terms on your own, and then we will talk about defining the terms. So take 5 minutes, describe what an ethical flaw is, describe what debriefing is, describe coercion, conformity, and bias, and we will get right back to you. Cool. Are you guys able to hear the music in the chat? Yes, perfect. Perfect. I think my computer's been weird. I've been able to hear the samba music, nor this. Dang, I'm really missing out. Cool. So take those 5 minutes, and we'll be back with you at the end. All right, we're halfway there, 2.5 minutes left. Just under a minute left. Wrap those definitions up. Cool. Finish up your sentences. And let's get into the answer. Awesome. So Jenna, if you want to hop over to the next slide, I believe we have our definitions laid out. Awesome. So first word, ethical flaws are what an experiment did wrong in terms of ethics. So while you're in here, drop in the chat. Do you feel good about these definitions? Did you get them right? Drop it however you're feeling. I'll let Rakesh take the next couple if he wants.
Okay, the mic is working now. Yeah. I mean, by now we should have gotten most of these, if not all of these, right? So debriefing, we know what debriefing is. It's when you're withholding information and actively deceiving participants, but once the study's completed, that's when you get all this information about what the study's true purpose was. And coercion, that's kind of like, I've heard, if you don't understand, you could try like using in a real context, like coercing someone to do what you want them to. So it's like persuasion using incentives, force, or threats. Conformity, we talked about conformity last night in social psych, and that's behaving in accordance with society's accepted norms or conventions. And then bias, these are inaccurate influences that skew the true results of a study. We've seen these all over the place. Hindsight bias, all kinds of them. So I think these ones are good.
Awesome. Yeah, and I saw a super good, or I was seeing a lot of comments about people not being sure what different words meant. So what I would recommend is try to like think about them in your day-to-day life, how would normally use these words, because I feel like I've used pretty much all of these words except for maybe ethical flaw. But even I feel like I've definitely used the word ethical in my life. So like think about like debriefing. What do we do after when there's like tea and we need to tell one of our friends about it? Like we have like a debrief, we go and talk about things. So it's probably when you talk then connected to your knowledge of research design. Okay, it's probably when we talk about what we did in the study with our participants. Then from there you can connect that more. Same with coercion, like Rakesh was saying, when someone forced, like I was gonna say someone was coercing me to do this, it means they're like forcing me to do it. They're pushing me into doing it. And that's a good way to approach the definitions if you don't know. Number one tip though, do not panic if you don't know what a word means. You do not need to get all of them right to get a 5 on the exam. It's okay if you don't know a word or two. Just try your best to get to that definition or as close to that definition as you can. Awesome, let's hop over to step number 2, which is application. So what we're gonna have you all do, if you wanna hop over to the next slide, is we are going to take those terms that you guys just did a wonderful job defining and apply them back to the prompt. So start to answer the question using the terms. Explain what the ethical flaws were of the study, explain how they could correct these ethical flaws, explain why debriefing, which we now know what that is, would or would not be necessary given the context, and talk about how those different vocab terms we just defined may affect the study given what we know about it. So we'll give you guys another 5 minutes and get right back to it. All right around 2 minutes. Let's start to finish those answers up. All right, just under 30 seconds. Get those last second answers in. Feel free to drop them in the main chat if you want now. I love this music. I was able to get my music working. I think the issue was I was on Safari and not Chrome. Awesome. We're back. Let's talk some applications. Cool. So first, let's apply ethical flaws. So the ethical flaw here is confidentiality and anonymity. Is that how you say that, Rakesh? I'm not sure. I can't. Words aren't working today.
Anonymity.
Anonymity. There we go. Words are not working for me today, but yeah. So the ethical flaw is confidentiality and anonymity, because the experimenters show the names and responses of each participant. A core part of research is that it is done. We do not publish the names of people. We do not publish their information because we don't want any results to be able to be connected back to someone. Why? Because people will be less likely to answer honestly. Demand characteristics will influence it. And then overall, it's just bad. It's bad practice for research. So we could improve this ethical flaw by just removing participants' names and emails before we post it to the website, or not even recording them in the first place. In fact, the only time you should really record an name and/or email is if it's a two-part study and you need to follow up with them to do the second half of the study. And it's a very big move in science right now to publish all of the data we collect online through open science so that other people can use it, other people can examine it. So it's still very important that we publish our data and make it widely available. Just even more important that we cut people's names out before we do that. So that's how we can improve that one big ethical flaw. Second, debriefing is not necessary in this experiment, as Brandon and his friend did not deceive any participants. No deception means we do not need debriefing. Though in general science, it is good practice to use debriefing for the purposes of the AP exam. If you do not use deception, you do not need to do debriefing. Cool, let's hop over to the next three. Or next one. Rakesh, you want to take this one?
Okay, I can take this one. Yeah. So for bias, I'm just going to read out this answer and I'll kind of explain after I'm done. So if Brandon or his friend has a bias towards the results, proving that higher family income proves more participation in extracurriculars, they might unintentionally approach students who they know are more wealthy in order to prove this. Social desirability bias could also occur if participants lied on the survey and some kind of spelling mistake out there and didn't want Brandon or his friend to think that they participated in an unusual number of extracurriculars. So yeah, we've seen a lot of biases, and if you could specifically name one, like this one, social desirability bias, which is really specific to surveys in general, that would be really good in getting you that point. And in I'm not sure if this is required, but I feel like just having one is enough. But if having two is going to really help you strengthen your analysis, then make sure you have two, especially if you think one is a little bit weaker. So definitely try your best with the analysis.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to the question we were talking about before. Is it better to provide more information? So you're not marked down for incorrect information unless it contradicts something else you said. Nonetheless, you don't have a lot of time. So if you are confident with one bias, I would take that and I would run with it and just stick to the one if possible. But yeah, so that's great. Bias, demand characteristics, perfect. Social desirability, wonderful. Had to hop over to the next word. Oh, just kidding. We skipped a couple. Actually, if you want to go back one more slide. So sorry. I will give you guys applications. Oh, there we go. There they are. So we have coercion up there. So if Brandon or his friends gave participants with a high family income an incentive to say that they participated in more extracurriculars than they actually did, it would skew the results positively. So great, we talked about where the coercion could be present. Again, this is using our imagination and how that would affect the results. So that would get the point for coercion. Additionally, for conformity, we have if Brandon or his friend approached students who were in groups, individual students may not have wanted to be honest that they actually didn't participate in many extracurriculars. And in order to appear similar to their friends, they may have lied and shared that they did participate in extracurriculars that they did not, which would again skew our data because we're not receiving accurate results. So that would get to that second point for conformity's sake. Awesome. Now let's get a little bit into how the FRQ is actually graded. The College Board lists a few key criteria that they look for. So they look for coherency, which means you don't have to have perfect grammar, but you want it to be as good to perfect grammar as you can. They won't take off points for spelling errors. However, if the word is spelled incorrectly and the reader can't decipher what it means, then they will not give you the point for it. So you want to make sure you're making your best attempt to make your answer coherent. Cash, you want to take the next one?
So the next one is conviction, if I'm not wrong. So conviction, okay. You need to make sure, actually wait. Sean, could you take this one really quickly? I'm
Yeah,
having
for sure.
I'm having some like issues with the slides.
Yeah, for sure. Conviction is like how confident are you in your response? They want you to really like take your response and they want you to run with it. You want to sound confident through your writing and you want to sound sure of yourself. So with this imagination, you want to make sure that you put your best foot forward and it's a very confident response. You're not wishy-washy and this might be this, maybe this. You're straight to the point, you're confident, and you're as correct as possible. With that, they recommend that you also use complete sentences. So you want to use your best, do your best, don't write in bullet points. It's fine if your notes are in bullet points, but make sure for what they're actually grading, you want to put that into paragraph form. Application, you want to make sure that you hit that last step. It's easier to define the words than to apply them. So make sure you don't just stop at definitions and you really take that next step to drive home the analysis and apply them to what we're talking about. Rakesh, you want to take the bottom few?
Okay, so we're on application, right?
Yes.
Okay, now I can see better.
Examples given. Examples given.
Oh, examples given. Okay, so for examples given, make sure this is similar to connecting with like the application bit. Make sure your examples are relevant. So I would always think about how strong is my example with my term. So if they were talking about, contact comfort, mentioning Harry Harlow's experiments, that's a really good example. So making sure your examples are concise, not to the point where you're explaining the whole experiment and like all of the conclusions, everyone involved, but just making sure it has a genuine connection with what you're trying to imply. And we also have underlining terms, and this is optional, but I like to do this because sometimes in FRQs, when I'm in a rush, I tend to forget to skip lines, and I might skip a word itself, and I have to rewrite that all the way in the bottom. And I don't want to erase everything, so I like underlining the words so that the reader and I know where I am, and so that it's easier for me to just organize what term goes where. So, finally, within a response will not be penalized for incorrect information unless it directly contradicts correct information that would have otherwise earned the point. So, basically, what this says is make sure you're not contradicting whatever you're saying. So, if you have a point, just go with it and go straight with it. That's exactly what Sean said when he was talking about conviction. So, just don't be confused and don't mix up what you're saying in your analysis with what your term is or your definition is.
Awesome, awesome. And yeah, I really just want to make sure we drive home the point that if your answer, this last idea that you won't be directly penalized for incorrect information unless it contradicts correct information. If you write a paragraph and it is like all incorrect information and there's like a tiny bit of correct information, that doesn't necessarily meet the threshold to get the point. So you want to try your best to do as much correct information as possible. And if you have a little bit that's incorrect, that doesn't really affect the quality of your response, doesn't affect what your definition or application, then you should be okay. Also, super, super, super important. I don't know if this is how it still is, but when I took the exam, you need a pen for your FRQ and you need a pencil for your multiple choice. So black or blue pen is necessary for the FRQ. Rakesh, is that still the case?
Yep, that is still the case. Make sure it's a black or blue pen. And also, I would recommend that it's not a pen that bleeds because that tends to get a little messy when you're writing FRQs, and you don't want it to like start bleeding onto other papers.
Perfect. Yeah. So just make sure you have both your pencil and your black or blue pen. Cool. Let's hop over to the next slide. I think that actually might be, FRQ tips, brief Q&A. Feel free to drop a couple questions in there. If you also want to ask questions about research methods, I am happy to answer those as well. I say maybe we'll take 3 questions to make sure we don't fall too far behind schedule. So if our wonderful chat team can throw some questions up on the screen.
I saw a really good question asking whether your testing centers or your schools are going to provide pencils and resources. Assume the worst in every situation. So I would always bring like 2 or 3 pens, like 2 or 3 pencils, because I don't know when, I might write a little too hard and my pencil snaps. So I would not recommend just putting all of your trust in whatever testing center you have, because it may not go well for you.
Yes, yeah, for sure. You always want to be prepared on your own. So awesome. Then I see a question popped up here. Are we required to write the definition in part A? I would say yes, write the definition because, well, worst case scenario, it doesn't hurt you to have the definition down. That just makes sure that the reader knows what you're talking about. So I would highly, highly, highly recommend writing the definition in part A. Then I saw another wonderful question that just popped up. What is the correlation coefficient? The correlation coefficient basically talks about how strongly 2 variables are related to one another in a correlation. It ranges from -1 to 1, with positive numbers being positively correlated, negative numbers being negatively correlated. And so the strength of the relationship is the higher number, or the higher absolute value of the number. So for example, we talked about this a little bit last night. If you had a correlation of 0.92 and -0.98, the -0.98 correlation is stronger. Even though it's a negative correlation, it is a stronger relationship because the absolute value is greater. So that is how I would think about correlation. And awesome, let's take one more question. Can we use bullet points and complete sentences, using bullet points to space out our terms and make it clear that we're defining and applying the term in the FRQ? I think Yoonji actually gave a great example of this when with the SODA acronym. So I would recommend spacing out, like leaving space between the different words. And that way you can still like space out the different terms and make it clear that you're applying and defining a different term. I would shy away from using bullet points because anything that's in bullet point form will not be graded. All right, do we want to take one last one? Oh, cool. Why was debriefing not necessary? They did not let them know that they would post their names. Yeah, so debriefing wasn't necessary because for the purposes of the AP exam, debriefing is necessary whenever deception is used in a study. The study itself did not use deception. They did not deceive participants as to what they were studying. They were very transparent. We're studying how extracurriculars and I think was income are related. So if there's no deception, if you're not lying to your participants at the onset of the study, debriefing is not required. Nonetheless, they did not let them know that they would post their names. That's correct. However, posting the names is an ethical violation, not something that they were deceived about. Because in any science, names should not be posted. Names should absolutely never be posted. So you definitely want to make sure that when we're talking about debriefing, we're focusing just on the study at hand. So just the experiment itself, how the experiment was designed. If deception was not used, debriefing is not necessary. Cool. Let's hop over to the next part, which I believe we're welcoming Jenna back up here.
I'm coming. Hang on. My stuff's not working. Crowdcast is always mad at me. I can't get anything to work. I'm here. Just no buttons work. No, not the main stage. Stop it, Crowdcast. Okay, there we go. I am supposed to have Amy down here with me too. So if Amy can, yay, hello, Amy, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. All right, so we are going to get started on reviewing Unit 1. So I'm going to hand it over to you, and you can lead us through. Oh, before we get there, just a reminder for everybody, I know I said this already earlier, we are doing the 3 main takeaways from every unit. If you can't remember anything else, these are the 3 things we want you to remember. So keep in mind, we cannot cover everything in all of these units. We're going to go a little bit more in depth on one particular unit, I'll let you know. But otherwise, we are just doing one slide, and then we're going to do a short Q&A section, and then we'll have a larger Q&A at the end. So let's get going.
Should I start it off?
Yes, please.
Okay, so there's 3 important things to remember from Unit 1, and this one appears a lot on the test. It's the 8 major approaches. You have to know how to apply the ideas. The common questions that you're going to get are basically, this psychologist would go with what, or this psychologist would treat this disorder with what. And it's you need to know how to apply. I've gotten so many questions on this. So I don't know if I should actually tell people to say it in the chat or say the approaches myself.
You know what? Just throw it to the chat and then we can talk about it. So throw it out and then let's chat.
Yeah, just say the approaches in the chat and then I'll confirm, I guess.
Yeah, so let us know in the chat. Actually, you know what you could even do is match those approaches with the psychologist that is most famous and most well-known. Psychologist/psychologists. And then Amy and I will get through the rest of them.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So type it in the chat.
All right, Amy, you want to start labeling me or giving me some?
Okay, Jenna, let's see if you are up to date on your site.
I didn't prepare for this.
Pop quiz.
No.
Who did psychoanalytic/psychodynamic?
Well, that one is easy. That's Freud. So we've got Freud on our psychodynamics and psychoanalysis. And then we also talked about Karen Horney, which I know in the slides was spelled like I-E-Y-E, but it's just E-Y. Also another very famous psychodynamic psychologist. Yeah. So let's definitely remember Freud's a big one. Now, I know I saw maybe 2 nights ago, some of us in the chat were saying that you guys had never learned about Freud because your teachers either couldn't or wouldn't teach it. Brief reminder, Freud will be on your exam. Like I can almost guarantee it that Freud will show up in some capacity. So you're going to want to know those things. Even if you weren't taught it in your own class, you need to prepare for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I see questions about Freud all the time, especially about his stages. Are very okay, let's who are some big people in the field of cognitive psychology?
Amy. Amy. Cog is not my area. I'm gonna be straight up with you. It's not my area. I could start guessing names of I know cog stuff, but cog names, not my thing. But I'll throw that one out to you because I know you know that.
I do know it, actually. Piaget was a big one with his stages.
Yeah.
I think he's actually one of the main ones. And then there was Nasser. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but I'm not sure.
And then we've got like humanistic psychology, our big shots from humanism being, do you want to jump in? So humanism would be
Maslow Rogers.
There we go. The happiest people on earth. That's the way that we can remember humanism. So rather than digging and continuing, do we want to move to number 2? So we know we need the 8 major psychological approaches, remembering the names. Ready for number 2?
Yeah. Okay. Oh, this is a chat question too. So there are many practices that scientists use for good research, and like just methods and just like technical things that they use in experiments specifically. And these like sort of help with validity and reliability. And if you need us to define those, I guess validity is like the accuracy and reliability is consistency, just like brief definitions. But yeah, just type it in the chat, like what you think would help with reliability and validity.
Yeah, reliability and validity both. Like we know that there's at least one research method that like consistently is going to improve the validity of any study. And there's only a few research methods that we really focus on in AP Psych. So there's one that's really, really important. Amy, can you tell me that research method that's like really great for improving validity?
Validity? Oh, absolutely has to be random sampling.
Yeah, so when we use random assignment and when we use random sampling in a experiment, we are absolutely improving validity. So awesome. All right.
Oh, and also a related term is random assignment.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to the third point, structuralism versus functionalism. So structuralism is a study of the mind, and I know it's going to sound stupid, like defining the term with the word in it, but like structuralism, like structure of the brain. And then functionalism too, like the function of the brain, like, so they're both very valid, but they emphasize different parts. And I guess I can just like, I try to type it quickly in the chat because I'm not sure if we have to move on, but try to type it quickly in the chat who were the major psychologists from each one, and then I'll just quickly say it.
Yeah, no, that's great. So while everybody's doing that, functionalism is actually the theoretical, the psychological theory that gave Rose, why can't I speak today? That inspired evolutionary psychology. So when we're really looking at the function and the purpose of traits, evolutionary psychology is one of the fields that does that, and then functionalism is one that kind of gave Rose to that. I can't speak, but that's all right. I clearly need more of this Red Bull.
You sound great, Jenna. I love you.
Thanks, Amy.
Okay, so structuralism was Titchener, Edward Titchener, I guess I'll say the full name. And then functionalism was James. And of course, there were a bunch of more people, but these were like the 2 main ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And then remembering too that Titchener actually studied directly under Wundt, and both of them used those introspection methods, whereas James did not. And so they used that functionalism.
Good Jenna, popping in with her psych knowledge.
All right, let's take some Q&A. Amy, you want to answer some questions about Unit 1. So like I said, we're brief on these ones. These are the three main things, the three main takeaways that we want from you guys. So we're going to try to expand on a Q&A. I know that there's going to be more questions for each unit. So if my chat team can pop some up on the screen here for us, if you guys have questions, pop them over in the Q&A. Psychoanalysis and psychodynamics. So Amy, did you want to take this or do you want me to?
I can take this.
Perfect.
So are they asking for the difference? I'm sorry, I can't really see the...
Oh yeah, it says, what's the difference between psychoanalysis and psychodynamics?
Oh, so psychoanalysis was the earlier form of psychodynamics, and it was basically like changed into it. And psychoanalysis was like Freud, basically his whole ideas, free association, manifest and latent content of dreams, unconscious conflicts, all of that good stuff. And then psychodynamic was basically his ideas applied to the modern context.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. All right, next one. Throw it up there. Oh, debriefing versus informed consent. I was trying to answer, it's still like a draft in my chat right now about debriefing versus informed consent. Informed consent is a requirement for every single research study. When you get into college and you start participating in studies as a requirement of your psychology credits, you will be provided with information about the study regarding what you will be doing. Researchers and psychologists will always tell you what you do. They might not necessarily tell you why you're doing it, though. So informed consent is the information in that document that you get that tells you what you're doing. It tells you what the incentive is for you doing it, be it $5, be it, credits towards something that you have to do for, Psych 1000, for example. That's informed consent. Debriefing happens after the study. It's required when deception occurs. So if we are either actively or passively deceiving our participants, that means if we're lying to them outright or if we're withholding information from them, that's deception, and we are required in that moment to provide them with the full context of why they were doing what they were doing. Deception is only allowed when we cannot study that relationship without it. So for example, I had a study pre-COVID, we were doing this study about women's safety mechanisms. And we didn't want to tell them that we were investigating their safety mechanisms, like what they do in order to maintain their own safety. If we told them that, we wouldn't see their true behavior. So we threw them into a virtual reality video game of Slender Man and then recorded the amount of times that they felt threatened. And so we had to debrief them at the end and tell them, yeah, by the way, this wasn't just a video game you were playing. We were actually investigating how aware of the threats in your environment that you were. So that required debriefing. But I have plenty of other studies, and so do many researchers, where we just collect data through questionnaires and we don't, passively or actively lie, and those studies don't require debriefing. So I hope that helps, because I know there were a lot of those questions. We're getting a lot. Okay. Amy, are you comfortable answering about statistical significance and p-values?
I know the general explanation. I don't know the math specifics.
That's okay. Math specifics, I don't think the AP is going to ask you to calculate a p-value ever. We did talk about this just the other day, but the p-value itself is just the likelihood that the true population results fall within the value that you have. So it's basically like a 5% chance that you're rejecting the null hypothesis. So p-values that are less than 0.05 are statistically significant. Anything above that is not statistically significant. So basically, if you're a researcher, you're just looking at the p-values, and things that are below 0.05 are good. Things that are above 0.05 aren't so good. To put that as simply as possible.
Thank you, Jenna.
Yeah. We can probably only take one more before we need to get, let's see, just me down here.
Putting you in the spotlight.
I know. That's all right. Anything else, or are we good to move on? Is one going to pop up? Okay, should be good after this one. All right. Oh, no, here we go. This is, so we'll answer that one when it comes to the learning chapter. So reinforcements, hold on to that question and we'll answer it in the learning chapter or unit, I guess. All right, let's move on then to talking about bio and behavior. Thank you so much, Amy, for coming down with us.
Thank you, Jenna.
John's back. What's up, Sean? I can't hear you. I did see that. Ah! Try it again. Let's see if Sean works this time. Now he's just gone. All right, I'm just gonna get, oh. No, I can't hear you. All right, that's all right. I'm gonna get going on this. So I promised you guys after night one, there was a quiz question that was on your review quiz that we answered, and I looked at it and I said, I don't really think that's accurate. And I promised you I would dig into it. So I've brought it back for us. So the question stated, what is the term used to describe the electrical charge difference between the inside and outside of a neuron, which is necessary for the transmission of signals? Now, it states that the correct answer is the resting potential. I am going to tell you that based off of the phrasing of this question, that's not entirely accurate, and I'm going to explain why. So I know, so that we all know kind of like what a resting potential and a membrane potential is. So anytime we look at the electrical charge difference between the inside and the outside of a neuron, wherever we test it at whatever stage it is in, that's always going to equate to the membrane potential. That's just what that term means, is the difference between the inside and the outside. So, you know, if we take away the stuff that's after the comma, this answer would for sure be membrane potential. Now, the stuff that's underlined in blue, which is necessary for the transmission of signals, the question writer had indicated or had like assumed that that was going to be enough to like indicate that a action potential could occur afterwards. But I don't think that that phrasing is entirely clear because necessary for the transmission of signals, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of electrical charge differences that are necessary to transmit signals. So for example, an action potential itself is a change in the membrane potential that facilitates the transmission of signals. On top of that, neurotransmitters are released across the synapse because of changes in the electrical potential that are going to facilitate that signal to occur. So I think with this particular question that we had talked about, the most accurate answer in this case is membrane potential. But this exact question obviously is not going to show up on your AP exam, but that's totally okay. I just wanted to make sure we were all clear with these terms. I know I have 180 messages in this chat that I can't get to right now. So if there are questions, if somebody from my team on the back channel chat could let me know if I need to answer anything, because I cannot scroll all the way down there right now. But all of those are going to be voltage dependent. The resting potential is for sure voltage dependent. The action potential is, but so is the release of neurotransmitters across the synapse. So I hope that that answers that question. Moving on, we are going to talk about three main things that are the biggest takeaways for this chapter. Each one of them gets their own page this time. So we have the breakdown of the whole nervous system. So remembering that the nervous system can be divided into two main parts, the central nervous system versus the peripheral nervous system. When we look at the central nervous system, all we're really looking at is the brain and the spinal cord. So it's pretty simple at that. It's centrally aligned through the midline of the body, and that is going to be your brain, your spinal cord. It's going to be encapsulated by, bony structures like our skull and our spinal, the vertebrae in our spinal cord, and then all of our neurons and all of the kind of like higher level cognitions come through there. Now, within our peripheral nervous system, that breaks down quite a bit more. We have these are kind of like early arms of the peripheral nervous system. So we don't really talk about these in our general discussions of the breakdown of the nervous system, but the motor arm versus the sensory arm. I saw a lot of comments recently about afferent versus efferent. So that's what we're doing here. These are terms that you might be familiar with that might pop up on the exam. Just remember that afferent with an A is approach. So we're always going to be talking about this in the context of the central nervous system. So the afferent arm is approaching the central nervous system. That means that it's all of the sensory fibers. We're going to talk about sensation in the next unit, Unit 3, but that's things like vision, kinesthetics, proprioception, taste. All of that is coming through and approaching the central nervous system through that sensory system. Then we have the motor system. This is the efferent arm, efferent with an E, and that means exiting. So this is information that is exiting the central nervous system and then going to the peripheral. This is broken down into two arms as well, the autonomic versus the somatic. The autonomic portion is the automatic functions that we don't have any cognitive control over. And then the somatic is the stuff that we do have cognitive control over. So this would be voluntary versus involuntary movements. So somatic is going to be like the way that I talk with my hands, for example, whereas autonomic is going to be my heart beating and my, digestion, things like that. Now that autonomic system is further broken down into two components, the sympathetic versus the parasympathetic nervous system. We know these as fight or flight versus rest and digest. So throw some of examples of any of these systems into the chat so we can kind of you guys can talk about it together. But remembering that the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system have opposite functions. If one increases, the other decreases. While the sympathetic nervous system dilates pupils, the parasympathetic nervous system constricts pupils. The sympathetic nervous system suppresses digestion. The parasympathetic nervous system engages digestion. Okay, so let's move on to the slide. I don't know why. Let me see. There we go. The slide that we got just lots of comments in the chat last time for. So I wanted to cover a few things here. We covered the neuron. We covered the structure of the neuron. We covered the signals that a neuron within it can maintain. So with the structure of the neuron, keep in mind that you're going to want to know all of these terms: dendrite, soma, axon, myelin sheath, axon terminal or terminal buttons. You're going to want to know what all of those terms are and kind of like how they facilitate the neuron with its resting potential as well as its action potential. I put some key terms with resting potential versus action potential here for you. So resting potential on average is about -70 millivolts, but certainly not always. It's really neuron dependent. Knowing that resting potential means that neuron is polarized, meaning it's more negative inside as compared to the outside. That's why we've got that -70 millivoltage or millivolt charge. And then from there, that action potential, just a couple of key terms to keep in mind with that one is the threshold. I also could have put up there the all or none principle, so knowing those terms. And then that refractory period that also happens with a neuron after it fires and before it can fire again. Now, the chemical signals of a neuron come in the form of neurotransmitters. There's a few main examples for the neurotransmitters that we put up here. So remembering that GABA is the primary inhibitory neurotransmitter of the central nervous system. GABA is going to slow down the brain. It's always going to make things less active. It actually slows down neuron firing. The opposite of GABA is glutamate. Glutamate facilitates neuron firing. It increases activity in the brain. So you can think about GABA and glutamate kind of like a stoplight signal. So whereas GABA is the stop sign or the stoplight with the red, the glutamate is the green for go. From there, we have a few others. So acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is the primary neurotransmitter in the peripheral nervous system. It's really important for things like movement. And it also plays a role in Alzheimer's disease. So if we think about that neurotransmitter with regards to Alzheimer's, that's really important. In addition, dopamine is another neurotransmitter that's really important for our reward systems. Dopamine is active whenever we do anything that is potentially addictive. For example, all of those dopaminergic networks are going. Dopamine is also active whenever we just enjoy things in general. And then dopamine plays a role in Parkinson's disease. Dopamine doesn't only exist in the reward systems, it also exists in our motor systems. So it plays a very strong role in Parkinson's, and all treatments for Parkinson's actually target increasing dopamine. Now, from there, we move to serotonin. Serotonin has roles in everything. Honestly, serotonin is like a main regulator of cognition. It plays roles in attention. It plays roles in sleep and awareness. So serotonin has just like a major role in a lot of different things that we do. The best thing that we can think of is depression. So with serotonin, this is a primary target of depressive disorders through things like, for example, SSRIs or SNRIs. So remembering that our SSRIs are those selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. We also have endorphins. This is a class of neurotransmitters. There's like a lot of different types of endorphins that are just, or a lot of different forms of this that are just all kind of grouped together to be called endorphins. These are really important for pain relief as well as for experiencing pleasure. So the way that we can remember endorphins is because it's actually a term that has been created to describe endogenous morphine. So endorphins act just like morphine does inside of our body. Endogenous means generated from within. So endogenous versus exogenous, which is generated outside. So when we look at endorphins, those are morphine-like chemicals that are generated within our own body. So really, really important for things like pain relief as well as experiencing pleasure. And then lastly, norepinephrine versus also epinephrine. I took epinephrine off of this list because it's primarily responsible for coordinating fight or flight in the peripheral nervous system. Norepinephrine is important for fight or flight in the central nervous system, initiating that, as well as for things like attention and awareness and psychological arousal, just meaning that we are aware of the things that are going on in our environment. Now, I know there's like so many comments and I don't have a second down here, but I can get to those in a bit if I can. We have terms to describe medications or supplements or any type of chemicals that are going to work on some of these neurotransmitters. An agonist is a chemical or a substance that increases the activity of a particular neurotransmitter. An antagonist is the same thing that's going to decrease the activity of that neurotransmitter. So I put up this particular diagram here or picture here to show you when we talk about SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, we are talking about medications that increase the bioavailability of serotonin. But I also talked about how they inhibit. So how do we really reconcile how that makes sense? I know I chatted last time, maybe Monday, or not Monday, night one. My days are so thrown. We chatted on night one about that transporter protein. So I want to highlight that right here. This is the presynaptic neuron. This is that transporter protein. So information is coming from the top here and then moving downwards. We have our synapse here and our receptors on the bottom. SSRIs function by blocking this transporter protein right here. And when they block that, it enables serotonin to stay in the synapse for longer, allowing it to bind to the receptors more heavily. For that reason, because it increases the activity of serotonin, even though it's an inhibiting medication, it is an agonist. So agonists and antagonists can work in varying different ways. But what we really need to focus on with these types of substances or medications is how they target the entire neurotransmitter system, not at the level of the individual neuron. So is it increasing the whole serotonin activity or is it decreasing? So keep that in mind as we go through those types of examples. And then I also wanted to talk about here some of the brain structures because we hadn't talked about that last time on night one. So no worries, we've got it here for you. I've broken up the domains into the structures that are on the cerebral cortex, so the outside of the brain, versus the more inner brain type of structures. So on the cerebral cortex, remember, we have two hemispheres in the brain. Now, I know this one's relatively easy. They are separated by something called the corpus callosum. So you can see that actually in this second slide right here, or the second picture. This is our corpus callosum. With our two hemispheres, we also have 4 lobes. I have my little brain here as well. So with our 4 lobes, we can think about the brain. So this is the front because it's got eyeballs. The frontal lobe is right here in the front. That one's super easy to remember. Frontal is always going to be at the front of the brain. When it comes to the order in which I remember these lobes, so we've got frontal here. The next one I try to remember is the occipital. I know it can't be in the front because that's the frontal lobe. Then I remember it's really weird because the occipital lobe is always in the back. So even though our eyeballs are in the front, the occipital lobe is all the way at the back of the brain back here. So that's going to be this one right here in the green. From there, the best way to remember the locations of the parietal and the temporal lobe, as far as I've been able to figure out, is that P comes before T in the alphabet. So the parietal lobe is on top and the temporal lobe is below. I know that's a really silly way to remember it, but I hope that that's helpful. So you can see the frontal lobe, the occipital lobe, the parietal lobe, and then the temporal lobe right here. From there, there are some notable areas and regions on the cerebral cortex that are important to remember. So we have talked about the prefrontal cortex. That's the very front portion of the frontal lobe. Remembering that the prefrontal cortex doesn't actually finish myelinating until you're 25 years old. So that is when our brain fully develops, is roughly 25 years old. I also have Wernicke's and Broca's areas highlighted here. The T and then the F are for which lobes those are in. So Wernicke's area is in the temporal lobe. You can see it right here in this kind of like darker shade of pink. And then Broca's area is in the frontal lobe right here in orange. From there, also keeping in mind that both of those regions, damage to those areas can cause Broca's and Wernicke's aphasia. So that's something to keep in mind as well. From there, we have the primary cortices. That means the primary motor cortex, the primary somatosensory cortex, the primary visual cortex. Those are labeled on here as well. The primary motor cortex is in the frontal lobe at this ridge right here. And then the primary somatosensory cortex is in the parietal lobe in this ridge right here. So those are the areas on the cerebral cortex that are important to remember. And then we can dive a little bit deeper into the brain, talking about the division between the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. So for the AP, you're not going to need to know a ton of the structures of the brain. Really limiting it to just these will be plenty. You do not need to know more than that. So if we're going to talk about the forebrain, which is the outer portion of, this is a silly way to say this, but the outer portion of the inner brain, I don't like the way, I don't like how that sounds, but that's what it is. It's going to be like the topmost portions and structures. That's going to include the thalamus. The thalamus sits just above the hypothalamus. So you can see the thalamus right here. I don't know if you guys can see my mouse, but the thalamus is right here. And then the hypothalamus is over here. So the forebrain is the thalamus plus the limbic system. Now there's a lot of structures in the limbic system. The only ones that are important for AP Psych to remember are the hypothalamus, the hippocampus, and the amygdala. So those 3 structures. So we've got the hypothalamus again right here. The amygdala is not on this. You're not going to need to label that one, but remembering the amygdala is the fear center. And then the hippocampus, it kind of looks similar to the corpus callosum in a sense, as well as the cingulate gyrus. So something that kind of like goes like this way. It looks like a little seahorse. That's what it's named after. So hippocampus, the main thing should be memory. From there, we go to the midbrain. We talked about the midbrain a little bit, I think, last time, honestly. The only thing you need to know about the midbrain is the reticular formation, important for things like awareness and psychological arousal. Then we're going to move to the hindbrain. The hindbrain is the pons, the medulla, and then the cerebellum. So those are the structures that are kind of at the base of the brain and forming like more of the inner portion of the brain once you get a little bit higher. So the pons is like a relay station. It relays information from the spinal cord up to the rest of the brain. The medulla or the medulla oblongata, and then the cerebellum as well, which is important for things like motor control, balance, and then storing any type of motor memory. Now, I know that's a lot of detail, but we don't have a ton of time to dig into all of these. So if we remember kind of like forebrain, midbrain, hindbrain, and then some of those structures that are within there, that would be really, really good. Okay. And then lastly, number 3 is consciousness. We did talk extensively about consciousness. So all I really wanted to say here was that there are a lot of phenomena, especially regarding things like attention, that influence our consciousness. So remembering things that like selective processing, automatic processing, change blindness, all of these are going to impact what we attend to and the information that we are going to receive from that. So my favorite example within the consciousness chapter is that video where you're supposed to be counting the basketballs and the number of times that they're passed back and forth, and then you miss the gorilla walking past you. And that is because we are attending to only the basketball passes, and we are completely disregarding the information that's coming in about the gorilla that's moving past us. So that is consciousness, and consciousness absolutely influences how we perceive and sense the world around us, which is actually our next unit. And so we're going to talk about sensation and perception with Zoe relatively soon. But before we do that, we're going to get into the Q&A. So I have 400 messages in the chat. There's not a chance I'm going to be able to scroll through those. So can I get maybe Sean down here with me to help answer questions, and then also the questions to pop up? Or Selena can come down. That works too. Hello. Your mic's not working still. No. I'm just going to have this thing all by myself today.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect. I just had to switch my mic to my computer. Awesome.
Yeah.
There was one question that I saw. I don't have an answer for it, but do you know any mnemonics that are a good way to remember neurotransmitters by any chance?
Look, it's harder for me, to be honest, to remember mnemonics than it is to remember just the original thing. So mnemonics,
honestly.
Yeah, mnemonics don't work for my brain as well. So if you guys know mnemonics for these, I really encourage sharing them in the chat, because I am not very good with those, and I'm not good at remembering them either. Sorry.
Yeah, let's use that chat. Drop any mnemonics that you got. Maybe those will help somebody else out as well.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, anybody on our team can relay those up to the top. Any of those Q&As.
Cool. Can you go over the reticular formation, medulla, and cerebellum functions again?
Yeah, go ahead.
Cool. Cerebellum is for a lot of motor skills. It's located like right here on your brain, like right under the back of your head. Yeah, Jenna has her little brain, and that's the majority of the function of it is a lot of our day-to-day motor skills. I leave it to Jenna. Jenna is the brain expert over here for the other two, and or if there's anything she wants to add to cerebellum.
So the reticular formation is kind of like a relay area. It's going to be really important for kind of like taking information from our like important regulating systems, things like heart rate, breathing, and then integrating them. So, and then like sending it back out to the rest of the brain, so that you can think about it like, so like everything's on track together and everyone's kind of got the same idea of what's going on in the brain. And then the medulla or the medulla oblongata, which is also really funny, is really important for, again, carrying functions. A lot of the, what are they called? The cranial nerves. A lot of the cranial nerves actually run through the medulla oblongata. Because as you can see, let me go back. Oops, wrong way. As you can see, it's the closest to the spinal cord. So it's the lowest portion of the brain right here. And so it's going to carry all of those cranial nerves, both in motor function as well as sensory, to where they need to go. So lots of like relay station type of things.
Cool, awesome. And I think pretty much the rest of the questions were answered through
Wonderful.
either the Q&A or in the chat.
Yep.
So I think we should
This
be
is
good to move on.
Yeah, perfect. This is our longest unit because you guys had wanted more information about the brain and the neurotransmitters and stuff. Everything else is going to be those kind of like 3 questions.
Awesome,
Yeah.
awesome.
All right, let's get, I believe, Zoe down here. Come on down.
Sorry, I was eating my ice cream.
That sounds really nice. All right, Zoe.
All right, so these are important things to remember from sensation perception. Obviously, sensation. So sensation is how we understand the world around us through our sensory information. So it's sensory input that we are detecting. And using the visual information like parts of the eye, remember from our past review from night 1, how these images are converted into neural messages for our brain to understand, which is transduction.
Perfect.
And then obviously perception is linked to sensation. And this is how we're interpreting and understanding the sensory input. So this is part of our schemas, which is concepts of thought that we add information to over time through accommodation and assimilation. And this is what we use for perception, that we're using previous knowledge to apply meaning. And how attentive we are changes how we perceive certain things. Which an example is selective attention, the cocktail party effect, that you're seeing, that you're hearing or detecting one stimuli above others.
Nice.
And then sensation and perception are also linked to bottom-up and top-down processing. Remember, bottom-up is with sensation, that it's moving up in the body, that it's moving up through your senses, and perception is moving down in specificity of our experiences and what we're perceiving.
Thank you so much, Zoe. So yeah, can we get some examples of the bottom-up, top-down processing ideas? Like Zoe said, sensation is going to be bottom-up. It's just eating that ice cream. Bottom-up, and then perception is top-down. So tell us some examples of why. And then while you do that, we can work on some Q&A. Send it up.
And remember, this unit is the smallest unit.
Yeah.
AP Psychology, it's only 7 to 9%. It's espresso chip ice cream. Need that energy. Nodes of Ranvier, that is from Unit 2.
That is from Unit 2. Quickly, I can tell you the nodes of Ranvier are myelin. They wrap around the axon. They provide insulation. The Schwann cells, those are Schwann cells. The nodes of Ranvier are the breaks in between the Schwann cells, and all together that makes up the myelin sheath.
There's a question about sleep stages. Oh, it just disappeared.
Oh, nice.
There are really like very few questions about this unit.
Okay, well, in that case, we can just leave them on the Q&A and we can answer them there. And we can move to the learning unit.
All right. Bye.
Thanks, Zoe.
Awesome, awesome. I'm ready to get into a little bit more learning about learning.
I love it. Sean, I think this is our last section teaching together.
Oh no.
Sean,
Oh wait, that's so
final
sad.
podcast moment.
Aww. It has been an honor to teach with you, Jenna. I love our on-camera moments.
All right,
Cool.
let's do it.
Let's do it. So the key theory for learning is first that classical conditioning is learned associations between two unrelated environmental stimuli. So think about Pavlov's dog experiment. So remember we talked about the dogs would start to salivate while the assistant was walking down the hallway with their food. The unconditioned stimulus is the food. The unconditioned response is the salivation to the food. Then Pavlov began to pair the food with a bell. So the bell was the neutral stimulus at first. The bell had nothing to do with anything else, other than the fact it began to be presented with food. Again, the unconditioned stimulus. So they continue to present the unconditioned stimulus and the neutral stimulus at the same time, leading to the unconditioned response, which was the salivation. So then this neutral stimulus, the bell, after presented enough with the unconditioned stimulus, became the conditioned stimulus. So again, neutral stimulus, conditioned stimulus, same thing.
Same thing.
Just
Always
yep,
the same.
Yep, do not forget that. Same thing. Which then elicited the conditioned response, which is the same as the
Oh, sorry, are you cueing me?
yeah.
The unconditioned response.
The
and
same
the
as the unconditioned
are the
response.
same.
Yes. So that is the Pavlov dog example. There's usually like one question asking you about this experiment on the exam, so it's a good thing just to know.
Yeah, it's a
And
relatively
then
small unit as well. So they can't ask too many questions about each of these phenomena.
exactly, yeah, it's a pretty small one. So then just make sure we're recalling the terms for classical conditioning. Awesome. Second is operant conditioning is learned associations between behaviors and their consequences. So the two big examples of that are Thorndike's cats and the Skinner box. Recall Thorndike's cats or Thorndike's puzzle box was when cats were placed in a box with food on the outside, and they had to figure out a way to get outside of the cage to get the food being the reward. So they were driven to do whatever they had to do inside the cage in order to get the reward. Skinner box, same thing. He also talked about shaping. He's the pigeons playing ping pong, also the pigeons spinning in a circle. Yeah, we use that's really cool. I still can't believe that someone was able to do that. But yeah, so recall like the spinning, and he got pigeons to spin in a circle through shaping, which is reinforcing small approximations to the ultimate goal of doing a full circle. If there's any other terms of operant conditioning that we can think of, feel free to.
And punishment, did we talk about those?
Yes, reinforcement. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we can't forget those ones. Reinforcement is something that encourages a behavior to happen again. Punishment is something that discourages a behavior from happening again. Hopping back to reinforcers, we saw the question earlier. A primary reinforcer is something that immediately satisfies a basic sense of ours, so such as food, water, shelter. A secondary reinforcer is something that our society has given meaning. So, for example, money. And secondary reinforcers can often be used to eventually lead to primary reinforcers. So money can buy food, which is a primary reinforcer.
Yeah, absolutely. When we look at those operant conditioning examples, make sure you decide first whether or not that behavior is increasing or decreasing. That's going to tell you if it's reinforcement or punishment. Then look at if the consequence is added or subtracted. That's going to tell you if it's positive or negative. It's the simplest way to attack all of those operant conditioning examples.
So right. Yeah, breaking it down by the word. I highly recommend. If you know what each of the 4 words mean, then you can figure out what any of the definitions mean. And same with fixed ratio, interval, etc.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Then our third one is social learning and latent learning, or 2 other methods of learning. So try your best to remember those as well. Social learning being Albert Bandura's idea with the Bobo dolls, that we learn vicariously through others. We can determine our own behavior based on the rewards and punishments we see others receive. And oftentimes we are more likely, we often model behaviors of people who are most like us. And we learn the most from people who are the most similar to who we are. Latent learning was the idea that you can acquire knowledge now that isn't important now. There's not necessarily a reward or punishment for it now, but will become important later. The example we often use for that is there was rats are put in a maze. They're just allowed to run around in the maze. There's nothing in there. But that way, when they put experimenters put food in the center of the maze, they were able to get to the food quicker with the knowledge that they stored through their latent learning.
Perfect. All right. Let's take some questions on the learning chapter. Throw those up on our... There was a question that had popped up. Oh, that's a great question.
That is a great question. Yeah, so the difference between shaping and modeling has to do with actually two of the different kinds of learning. So shaping is reinforcing. So this is operant conditioning is shaping. It is reinforcing small approximations to achieve a larger behavioral goal. So the example that I most often use is Skinner getting a pigeon to spin in a circle, where the pigeon is facing in front, and then they get a food reward for spinning a little bit in the circle, going a little bit of the way. Then Skinner puts them back to the front. Then they get food when they go a little further, and they go back to the front. And then they a little further, back to the front, and they get reinforced each time. They get further around the circle until they start to make a full circle. So that is shaping. Whereas modeling is a tenet of our social learning theory, which is Albert Bandura's Bobo dolls. And that's the idea that people, we can learn behaviors through others. Other people model behaviors, and we can learn through their rewards and punishments, what the consequences of their behavior is. We can learn to apply to our action. So if someone gets in trouble for punching somebody in school, we don't need to punch someone in school and get the punishment of that to understand that that's not okay. We can see someone else did it, they received a punishment for it, and now I know I should not do that.
Absolutely. There's also some in our back channel says to go over fixed variable ratio and interval schedules as well.
Yeah, for sure. So we talked a little bit about how it's good to know what each of the words mean. So if you know, fixed means the same number of either time or occurrences. Variable means different, change. Ratio talks about the number of times. An interval talks about a period of time. So ratio is like number of occurrences. Intervals is like minutes, hours, days, weeks, etc. So a fixed interval schedule is the idea that a behavior is rewarded after a fixed amount of time. So every 5 minutes that the behavior occurs, I give a reward. So that would be a fixed reward schedule. Variable, that would be a fixed interval schedule. A variable interval schedule is the idea that it's not every 5 minutes I get the reward, but on average, every 5 minutes a reward is given. So that means I might reward the behavior after 7 minutes, I might reward it after 3 minutes, but nonetheless, they will all average to getting a reward every 5 minutes, even though it's not reinforced on that fixed time scale. Cool. Do you want to do the ratio ones?
Yeah, so ratios are just numbers. Just remember that ratio will always refer to number. So if we have a fixed ratio, that number stays the same. It's fixed, it's unchanging. If we have a variable ratio, the number fluctuates around an average. So just remember, honestly, just remember those 4 terms individually. Fixed, same. Variable, changes. Interval, time. Ratio, number. And then we smash those terms together to create the 4 different schedules, very much like we smash together reinforcement, punishment, positive, and negative. So same exact idea. Remember the 4 separately, and you can rule the operant conditioning world.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, this question I saw just popped up. What is the difference between classical and operant conditioning? Classical conditioning is behavior that is a learned association between 2 stimuli. So learned association is what you want to, between different stimuli, is what you want to think of when you think of classical conditioning, whereas operant conditioning is behavior learned through rewards and punishment. So that is the difference between the 2.
Yeah, one other thing that you can use to differentiate them, classical is involuntary. So it's either an emotion or a physiological response. It's not something that you voluntarily experience. And then operant conditioning is voluntary. So it's a behavior that you do. So yeah, you can think about it that way as well.
Awesome.
We probably moved to the next one, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, just kidding. We're going to take a 2-minute brain break.
Woo!
All right. You've got a few minutes. Take your break, and we will see you back here. If you don't have to go do anything, stretch a little, take a breather. All right. Let's go. Never long enough. They're never long enough. I think up next, we've got Yoongi's going to come down for Cog. Bye, Sean. I'll miss you. It's like our little podcast is over. While I've got you here, I'll show you all today's show and tell. I didn't have anything psych related, but I do have my favorite shirt, which says, "Sometimes science is so difficult, it makes me sad." So that I think is really relatable for all of us right now.
Too applicable.
Oh, sometimes science is so difficult, it makes me sad. You guys are going to do great, though. Miss Yoongi, can I get you down here, please? Bye, Sean.
Am I staying up here for the second half, or are you?
Yeah, I was going to switch out right after Yoongi's.
Sounds good.
See you soon.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. I cannot see you, but it might just be me. Oh, there you are.
Oh, and can everyone see me?
You
I can see
good?
you.
All
All
right.
right.
How are we
Oh,
doing with
this is
consciousness?
I've been like answering all of those Q&A like questions, and I've been really going at it. All right. Here we go, everyone. I'm just gonna say you guys are gonna do great tomorrow, and let's get into it. So one of the first key things that you need to take away, of course, is how we encode information into our memory. So remember, you will have the stimulus that goes into your sensory memory, then that attention span, so it's going to go into your working memory. From here, it can be either forgotten or rehearsed, okay? And then you encode it into your long-term memory, and working memory and short-term memory, they're in like that same kind of box. Now, your capacity for your long-term memory is infinite, but if you don't keep retrieving information and like going over it over and over again, kind of like the learning curve, you will forget it. And remember, semantic and episodic memory, I'm sure you guys already remember it, but like the episodic is like, oh, this is all about me. These are my experiences. This is what I had for lunch today, you know, or
Life.
yeah. And then your semantic is like, what did we say? The cold hard facts. So like
I loved that.
these are like I think that was the greatest thing that I've ever said. But that's kind of like lions and tigers. They're mammals, so it's the stuff you learn in school. So, all right, next. All right, recall versus recognition. So, recognition is identifying like previous learned information using an aid. And what that kind of means is like if you're given an AP psychology multiple choice question, you know, they're gonna what is it? They're gonna give you like options. It's like I forgot how to take
Multiple
the
choice.
test. Yeah. And you're gonna be like, oh, well, I know it's not this, and I know it's not this, so it must be this. And then your recall is the most difficult one. So this is kind of what you use flashcards for, to really, really get the information to stick. That's like, blank was the 46th president of the United States, and you just have to like pull that out of your brain.
From the depths, just.
Yes, from the depths. And I am taking AP US history, and I don't even know the answer to that. All right, next question, or next key. All right, Anisha.
Yeah. So
I know that we had a little bit of confusion. Was it last night?
Probably.
My memory deceives me. See?
Oh.
All right. So remember, retrograde amnesia, think retro, an ability to remember old information. Antrograde amnesia, think that antro is like after, so inability to form new memories. Just make sure that, you know, Fiveable has a really good like condensed library for Unit 5, since it is a heavy hitter, but if you're only going to remember these 3 things, let it be this. But I do suggest just going through and reviewing tonight.
For sure. You can also throw in that interference we talked about recently. There was a lot in this chapter, like Yoongi said, so there's a lot of content to really focus on. You ready for Q&A, Yoongi?
Absolutely, or at least I hope so.
Throw those questions up here for us. Let's see what we've got.
I already see one. All right. Okay. Is implicit memory the same thing as procedural memory? Jenna, because I feel like being wonderful today.
Yeah, so implicit.
I want to test you.
Procedural is a form of implicit memory. So when we have our procedural memory, this is things like skills, walking, riding a bike, and things like that. That's going to be a implicit memory, and then we have an explicit memory, which is like semantics, episodic information, and stuff like that.
And here you can apply that like effortful versus like shallow processing, because I remember having a question the night before that was like, wait, is riding the bike implicit or is it like, and I was like, well, it goes from being.
You can think about it like implicit being I have like an association of implicit with like an unconscious. Explicit is like I have to go do it. So that's kind of how you can think about that. What does this question say? Long-term potentiation and short-term potentiation. I'm going to be honest, that one I'm not quite sure about, but I can do a quick little Goog and see. Oh, yeah. So potentiation is just strengthening of synapses. So when we have long-term potentiation, that's like facilitating things like synaptic plasticity. I'm not, so that's LTP, but with short-term, oh, this is just like an immediate connection that's made. So like an immediate synaptic connection. So like a short-term potentiation could be something like the neurotransmitter is secreted across the synapse, and that increases just like temporarily and immediately the strength of that synaptic connection. Long-term potentiation is going to be like if a connection is built numerous times or synapses have like activity over a longer period of time, that's really going to strengthen that connection. So yeah, long-term potentiation is the same idea as synaptic plasticity.
Okay, so the HM case study. So I'm trying to remember the name. I think it's like Henry Gustav.
Well, they use just initials for anonymity.
Yeah. Well.
No, it's okay. If we know his name, we know his name, but that's the intention of using initials.
Yeah, but so essentially this was a patient that these doctors were trying to like cure epilepsy in his brain. And it just kind of goes through like one, the APA guidelines of having an ethical study, but also it was like they removed the medial portion of their temporal lobes, I believe, and they experienced memory problems because of that. So it's kind of like a botched surgery. Yeah, wasn't great. But yeah.
Let's see what else we can get. Maybe one more. Phineas Gage. So I know that didn't pop up, but that was in our back channel. Phineas Gage for a little bit we can talk about for sure. So Phineas Gage is like one of the principal case studies in psychology because he had that tamping rod that pretty much exploded straight through his face, under his cheekbone, and out the top of his head. The importance, though, of the Phineas Gage case study was to show that despite the damage to his brain, it went through his frontal lobe. So again, under his cheekbone and out the top. Despite that damage, he still was able to survive quite fine. However, he had a lot of changes in his personality, a lot of changes in like his wants and desires. So he used to, before his injury, had been like a family man and, you know, they say like a good husband. And then after his injury, his personality changed quite significantly. He was gambling, he was drinking a lot, and he wasn't like coming home and things like that. So that was going to show that even though he had this massive injury to his brain, the areas that were injured were more correspondent with like higher cognitive functions than with anything else.
Deductive and inductive reasoning. Okay, so real quick, inductive is like the bottom down approach, while deductive is that top down approach. So inductive reasoning takes you from like specific to general, and then deductive reasoning, you make inferences by going from like general premises to like very specific conclusions.
You can think about it so just like that. So inductive is inferences, which is perfect. And then deductive is you're deducing a general theme from something specific. So I know like the terms are not that straightforward, but inferring from induction is perfect. I love that. And then deducing from into a larger set. Okay. I know we're speeding through it, but how do we feel about moving on to developmental?
All right, guys.
Okay, I'm heading up to the meeting, and Sean and Rakesh will be here for you.
I'll see you later.
Thank you, guys. Awesome. I think Rakesh is going to take the lead on this one.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, awesome. He's there.
Is my camera working?
I do not see you.
Okay, wait. I have no idea. It's just like wild some days.
We can hear you at least. That's what's important.
Let's keep going with that. So the key 3 things for developmental psych, aka best unit, is obviously nature versus nurture. You've heard about it in the first couple of units. You're going to hear about it here too. And the main really component to remember is how nurture works on what nature endows. And I'm going to kind of mix up 2 and 3 a little, and I'm just going to say, make sure you know all of each and every psychologist's stages of development, whether it be moral development, cognitive, psychosocial. Make sure you know all of them. For Piaget specifically, try knowing. You can know the names, but you should also know where does conservation start to form? Where does egocentrism, like what stage is that mostly in? So make sure you know specific factors related to each one. Additionally, I'm sorry if it's like not in the right like pattern with the slides, but make sure you know the major ideas for Erickson. So make sure you know the positive, the negative outcomes. It's also really nice if you know the ages. I discussed the ages, I think, in night 3. So you could obviously take a look at that and make sure you know that too. And also really quickly, just make sure you know parenting styles, attachment styles, and basically just know a bunch of the key psychologists. If you know psychologists and what they do, I think that just covers most of this unit and prenatal development. I think that's about it for developmental.
Awesome stuff. Yeah. Why doesn't everyone take a second, drop in the chat? Like, what are some of the major developments of each of Piaget's or Erickson's stages? Rakesh, what are some things that we know about like Piaget's like sensory motor stage? I feel like I see this one come up on the test a lot.
Yeah. So in Piaget's sensory motor stage, it's basically where this is the earliest stages in life. So we're starting to explore new things. We're starting to discover. And so as you sort of transition, you start to see stuff like you see a lack of conservation. You don't understand object permanence. Same thing with egocentrism. You start to see egocentrism. But egocentrism, that sort of stops at around age 7. So that's something nice to know as well. So basically know those three. I feel like those three are really good. So egocentrism, conservation, and then object permanence.
Yeah, and then an important idea with egocentrism is that when children develop a theory of mind, I know that's a pretty important vocab term, usually in AP Psych. When they begin to develop a theory of mind, that's when they learn to take the perspective of someone else, and that's kind of when that egocentrism dissolves. So it's formally known as being like fully developed near the end of the pre-operational phase, pre-operational stage. What about Erickson? What are some important like themes that we know from Erickson?
So obviously for Erickson, you should definitely know the names. Like if you don't know what trust versus mistrust is, that's kind of an issue, especially on the last day of trans. So know each of the names and be able to understand, like I said, the positive and the negative outcomes, because there's always going to be an outcome that is desirable, and that'll probably be, like in trust versus mistrust, a trust is developed versus mistrust, where they're not as trusting and they're very suspicious and skeptical. So knowing just this and then kind of like the age groups are basically all you need for Erickson. And
Yeah,
we
it's good
also
to know.
sorry.
Oh no, sorry, you go ahead.
And really quickly for the stages of morality, make sure you know there's only 3 stages. So that one's easy. It's pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. Make sure you understand that most people don't get past conventional. Only a few people, they kind of transcend into post-conventional morality. And yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, super good to know like where different aged people live. If you get a question, someone who is like 14 would most likely face what struggle described by Erickson, something like that. You'd want to be able to answer. And then, yeah, I guess the nurture versus nature idea is just one that is super, super, super important. Is super important to think about. We talk about nurture and nature as a key theme across all of AP psychology, all of the psychological field as a whole. So making sure nurture works on what nature endows. That comes straight from the development unit and is something you really want to be able to apply throughout every unit. Cool. Let's open it up to a Q&A now. If our wonderful chat hosts want to throw some stuff up on the screen.
Okay. Also, really quickly, an easy way for Erickson, one of his main goals for puberty is developing an identity of self. So that's also the stage we're in right now, identity versus role confusion. That's the stage we're in, which is 12 to 19 years old, and that's when we're going to be kind of looking for our identity. And if we succeed, we'll have a stable sense of self. If we don't, we're still going to be a little confused about who we are. Okay, so we got a question. How can I remember Piaget and Kohlberg's stages? So for Piaget, I heard a couple of good acronyms, but for me, I use some penguins carry fish as mnemonic. I know it might not work for some people, but I try using them because it helps me a lot. So sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and then formal operational. For Kohlberg, it's pretty simple. It's just conventional, but just make sure your prefix is right. So pre-conventional is in younger ages, conventional, and then post-conventional. So that should be pretty easy.
Awesome. I saw another one pop up. What is the difference between concept and schema? So Rakesh, if you want to talk a little bit about schemas.
So I think I'd like to have somebody else take this one.
I can jump in on the schema, unless Sean, you wanted to take it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, schemas are kind of like mental representations we form for groups. So there are 2 like key vocabulary terms within the domain of a schema, and that's accommodation and assimilation. So if I have my schema is like things with 4 legs, then assimilation might be like dogs and cats and mice and everything with 4 legs is assimilated into that schema. So things that have 4 legs is my broader representation, and I assimilate things into them. And then accommodation is when we revise our schemas to be able to discriminate between different things. So for example, all fluffy 4-legged animals don't go into one schema. I'm able to differentiate between a cat and a dog, and that's the process of accommodation, so forming 2 different schemas. Cool. I think maybe we can take one more question. Do we see any questions, anybody? Can we go over the ages for each theory's development stages, please? I think that would take a very, very long time to go through the age groups for all the stages for everybody. So I'm going to leave that on you guys to do. But it's more important to definitely, when thinking about development, to know bigger ideas in development. So Erickson's talks about like progressing through like stages of like different stages of development. We talk about trust versus mistrust, and how as we progress, we like take on more complex levels of understanding ourselves, understanding others, understanding the world. Kohlberg talks about how we progress morally throughout our lifetime. And Piaget talks about like cognitive development, how we develop as individuals, how we develop in understanding the world. So like we have, you know, our sensory motor, egocentric, black object permanence, pre-operational. We begin to develop this theory of mind near the end of it. Concrete operational. We have a fully developed theory of mind. We can start to think more abstractly. We can start to think more concretely about facts and figures. Formal operational is when we can start to think more abstractly about the world. Cool.
Yeah, I think we're good for this unit.
Awesome. Let's learn all about motivation, emotion, and personality. I think it's, Christina coming up with me. Awesome.
Hey, thanks, Sean. I'm so excited for Unit 7. I love personality psych, and we have a lot to cover. So yeah, I'm just going to jump right into it. So in Unit 7, it's really important to remember all of the various approaches from Unit 1 that are used to understand like the various differences in motivation, emotion, and personality. So I'm just going to briefly go over the approaches that you should be familiar with, but they include the biological approach, which kind of looks at genetics and hormones and like how the brain affects all of these individual differences. And then the next one is the behavioral approach. So that basically focuses on how our external environment and all the factors in our external world kind of shape our personality and behavior. And this includes like rewards and punishments. And then the next approach you should be familiar with is the cognitive approach. So basically, this kind of works to look at how all of our thoughts, beliefs, and expectations influence our motivation, emotion, and personality. And then the next one you might be familiar with is the psychodynamic approach. And it basically just emphasizes the role of the unconscious and how early childhood experiences, like what you experience as a child, can shape like your personality today. And then the next approach is Carl Rogers, my king, the humanistic approach. And it basically emphasizes just self-actualization and personal growth and how that can also influence personality. And then the last approach that I want to talk about briefly is the sociocultural approach. And this is pretty self-explanatory, but it just looks at how our social factors and our cultural factors in society shape our motivation and also our emotion. So it's really important to remember all these approaches, because remember, for the FRQ and for the MCQ, you have to be able to recognize like the different approaches and be sure to apply it to the specific situation. So I actually created an example MCQ of this for you that I'm going to drop in the chat, so feel free to answer it. So it says, which theory best explains why a person experiences different emotions in response to the same event depending on their past experience and cultural background? So feel free to answer that, and I'll give it a few seconds. And yeah, and I guess I can explain like what the correct answer is, but the correct answer is C, and that basically is the chapter. I'm so sorry if I mispronounce it. I genuinely don't know how to pronounce it, but the Singer two-factor theory. And this is really important concept to know for the AP exam. And it's basically a theory that suggests that emotions are a product of both our physiological arousal and also like how we interpret the situation like of our arousal like cognitively. So in other words, people experience like emotions based on how they interpret their sensations in their physical atmosphere. And all the other like answers are wrong. So I'll just go over the other theories real quick. The Cannon-Barr theory is just revolving around emotions and physical reactions that occur at the same time. The James Lange theory kind of suggests that emotions are a byproduct of physiological responses to different stimuli. And then biological theory, it's also just a really like broad term and theory, but it doesn't apply to this question specifically because it doesn't address cognition. It's more so about genetics and how that plays a role in emotional experiences. So yeah, and then moving on to our second bullet point, it's really important to understand the concept of cognitive dissonance and how this can influence behavior. So cognitive dissonance occurs when there's basically a conflict between like our beliefs and attitudes and also like our behavior. And so like specifically in order to reduce like the sense of like uncomfortability, a lot of people may like alter their beliefs and attitudes in order to just like feel less anxious or just change their perception on things. So this phenomenon can be seen like through the first one here. As you can see, the example is dieting. So a lot of people may be able to justify like eating junk food just because they believe that they've been following a strict diet plan for a very long time. And there's also the idea of Festinger's lies, as you can see on the screen. And basically, this is a study on cognitive dissonance, and it's where people were paid a small amount of money to lie about a really boring task, and they rated the task actually like a lot more positively than those who were paid like I think it was $20 or just like more money to lie. So the next example is also seen in smoking. So a lot of individuals who smoke experience cognitive dissonance because they know that smoking is really harmful to their health, but they still continue to do that. So just understanding this big concept of cognitive dissonance is really helpful, and just like remember how to minimize this phenomenon. And I also have another quick MCQ that I'll paste in the chat because I think it's really helpful for me, but it's about cognitive dissonance, and you guys can answer. Sorry, it's a bit long, but yeah, I'll give a few seconds if you guys want to answer that. But I'll just read the question.
Practice.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sean. What were you gonna say?
Oh no, I'm loving these multiple choice practice. It's a great way to get
Oh,
ready.
thank you. Oh my gosh, sorry. That's just how I like to study with a lot of questions. But
Me
yeah, okay,
too.
so great job, you guys. I see like a lot of mixed answers, and I'll just move on to answering the question just so we are on track. But the correct answer is yeah, it is B. Good job, guys. So this best describes cognitive dissonance because the person's beliefs about the importance of protecting like their environment, it just contradicts like the whole reality of like the company's really harmful and unethical practices. So in order to feel less anxious and less like uncomfortable about this conflict, the person may just try to like justify their decision to accept the job by just denying these really like adverse effects of like the company. And obviously the other answer choices are wrong because it doesn't really relate to cognitive dissonance. So yeah, and then lastly, guys, we are going to be talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I saw a few people comment about this in the chat, but this basically explains that once basic needs are met, individuals will try to satisfy higher needs in the hierarchy. And this includes like self-actualization. And specifically, like individuals may like move up and down the hierarchy depending on like their various circumstances and personal experiences. So the next bullet point, I think it's bullet point number 3. This is a question for you guys. Drop it in the chat. What are the different levels, if you guys can remember it, and why are they stacked in such a way? So I'll leave a few questions. Yes, we love Maslow. Maslow is great.
it's really interesting. It makes sense, I feel like, too, just in theory, but I think it was cool to have someone finally like put it into this pyramid shape.
Yeah, no, I love it. Oh my gosh, it's such a cool theory. But yeah, you guys are right on top of it. And yeah, so just to answer the question, like this hierarchy, I think you kind of remember it by like starting off with your most basic needs, like what do you really need to survive? Like physiological needs like food, safety, sleep, and water. And then this also these like basic needs have to be fulfilled before you go on to more complex needs. And this includes like love, belonging, and like esteem needs. And also like you get to a point where you reach the tippity top of the pyramid, which is self-actualization. And the hierarchy is actually like stacked or arranged in this manner because Maslow believed that humans have this really natural tendency to satisfy these basic or lower level needs before they go on to like more higher level or complex needs. And once these physiological needs are met, humans actually fulfill all of these like socio-emotional needs, and then they are able to hopefully fulfill higher level needs and reach a sense of self-actualization. So yeah, and that's basically the key terms you should nail down for this unit. So, okay.
Awesome. Let's do the Q&A. Can we go over some of the surprising results of Leon Festinger's study? All you, Christina.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. So I think I mentioned this like a bit before, but I guess I'll just say like what the study is again. But what Festinger's study was basically it's a study all about cognitive dissonance. And I think one key takeaway that I would remember for the AP exam is that participants were paid like there were participants who were paid like $1 to lie. I think it was $1 versus participants who were paid around like $20. So obviously a huge like much larger sum to lie. And the key result of this study that is that like the participants who were paid like less money to lie, they actually like thought the task, like the really boring task was actually like a lot more interesting, or they rated it like more positively in comparison to those who were paid like $20 or a larger amount of sum to like rate the task, if that makes sense. But yeah.
Cool, cool. Are there any other ones that we want to throw up there? Cool. Tips for minimizing cognitive dissonance. Yeah, so that as humans, as just people in the world, we tend to try to minimize cognitive dissonance in any way that we can, which Christina explained very well before. We want our future self to align with our current self's belief, and we want our past to align with our current self's belief. We try to think that our mind has always had the same consistent beliefs, because that reduces cognitive dissonance within our brain. So, for example, I think last night we talked a little bit about the foot in the door approach in social psychology with political candidates. So if you like sign a someone's candidacy statement, you're more likely to put a poster up for them because that minimizes cognitive dissonance. It doesn't make you feel like you're switching up on somebody. But there's just in everyday life, we seek to minimize cognitive dissonance in any way we can, whether that be looking back at past events and trying to remember them slightly differently so that they align with what our current self believes, or whether thinking about the future, acting in the way that we currently believe. Like if I support X political candidate, it's highly, highly unlikely I would put up a sign for Y political candidate, because that would create cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, I think Sean like explained it extremely well. And I guess just to add on to that, some other ways to minimize like cognitive dissonance is by like altering your behavior. So again, with like the smoking example, if you think that smoking or like hitting a vape is harmful, but you continue to do it anyways, you may feel like a large sense of cognitive dissonance. And then to minimize this or to feel less discomfort about it, you can like quit smoking. And then there's also a very popular one, which is rationalizing behavior. So if you like feel cognitive dissonance, you can rationalize your behavior. Like if you feel guilty about like not recycling stuff, but you continue to throw away a lot of items that are recyclable, you can rationalize this behavior by just telling yourself, oh, like my recycling won't really make a difference. So that's also another way to do it.
Yeah, that's like super like timely and applicable too, especially vaping example, I actually recall reading something. I read something somewhere. I'm so specific, but I read something somewhere that talked about how people would also like rationalize, like people who were smoking and would try to say they didn't believe that smoking was as bad for you as people who didn't smoke. So people who did not smoke thought that smoking was worse for your health than people who did smoke, which is a way that people who smoke, for example, or vape try to reduce cognitive dissonance by believing that it's not as bad as it actually is. So that is a super interesting example. I believe we have as the last question, oh, just kidding. I guess that was our last question. Thank you so much, Christina.
Thank you so much, guys. You guys got this.
Awesome. Unit 8, let's jump to clinical psych. The amazing Selena coming up to walk us through it.
Hello. Okay, so I'm going to help you guys go through a review for Unit 8, which focuses on clinical psychology. Okay, so the first thing that you guys need to know is the key features of each psychological disorder. And I'm not saying like each disorder specifically, but more so the groups of these different disorders. For example, neurodevelopmental disorders, which are like disorders characterized by an impairment in cognition or communication or behavior that results from some sort of abnormal brain development. And then we have psychotic, which also like stems around schizophrenia, which is characterized by like lots of irrational ideas and distorted perceptions and loss of contact with reality. So in these disorders, you'll see a lot of like symptoms, including hallucinations and delusions and disorganized speech, also known as word salad. And then when we go on to mood disorders, I want to remind you guys that there are two categories. One is depressive disorders, which are like characterized by a persistent, sad, empty, or irritable mood. And then our second category is bipolar disorders, which are characterized by extreme mood swings alternating between manic and hypomanic episodes, and also depressive episodes. So I want to remind you guys super quick that manic episodes are more severe than hypomanic episodes, and that's one of the distinguishing factors between bipolar 1 disorder and bipolar 2 disorder. And our next category is anxiety disorders, which are disorders that are characterized by a distressing and persistent fear, also known specifically by Jenna as fear of fear, and anxiety and maladaptive behaviors that reduce anxiety. And then we also have behavioral disorders, which include eating disorders and addictive disorders. And eating disorders, I feel like a lot of you guys already know, but in case you guys need a little bit of a refresher, are characterized by the presence and persistence of unhealthy eating habits that impair your physical and mental functioning, while addictive disorders are characterized by the misuse of addictive substances such as alcohol and drugs. And I think we forgot to put on here trauma-related disorders. And on AP Psych, it's basically just PTSD that you guys need to know when it comes to trauma-related disorders. And then we also have personality disorders, which are disorders where a person has long-lasting and flexible patterns of thinking and behavior that impair social functioning. So really quick, I want to go over how personality disorders have 3 clusters, A, B, and C. And for cluster A, these disorders are characterized by odd or eccentric behavior. And what do I mean by odd or eccentric behaviors? That's, it means kind of like people might have symptoms that include paranoia or hallucinations or delusions. And then in cluster B, they're characterized by dramatic and impulsive behaviors. And then in cluster C, we have disorders that are characterized by fearful or anxious behaviors. And
Awesome.
then
One quick thing I want to note about this first bullet point too is Selena just did a fantastic job of overviewing the like key features of each disorder, and you really want to make sure you know what makes like one like genre, so to speak, of disorder different from another. because most questions on the AP exam will if it'll give you like a characteristic of some sort of psychopathological case, and it will give you options for like which disorder is like, you know, the most likely one to fit with this characterization, and they likely will only have one from the correct like branch of disorder. So if you know what makes a neurodevelopmental disorder different from a mood disorder, you're probably going to be able to get those questions right. So yeah, definitely, Selena just did a fantastic job explaining all the big ideas of each of them. So make sure that that's what you know if you don't have time to memorize all the specific ones before tomorrow.
Yes, 100%. And that kind of takes us into our second thing that you need to know. It's okay. Yeah, so basically what Sean just said, when it comes to like especially multiple choice questions, it's basically just going to give you disorders from different groups. So just make sure you know what differentiates like a personality disorder from like a mood disorder. Okay,
so sorry, I didn't realize that was a
okay.
separate bullet point.
Okay, and then the third thing you need to know is how nurture and nature both contribute to etiology, which if you guys don't know what that word means, it's basically the cause of these disorders, and both medications, which kind of takes over the biological part. And if we're talking about like an anxiety disorder, like antidepressants, and therapies, which take over the psychological department of nurture and nature, and that includes like behavioral therapy or useful methods for treatment when it comes to treating a disorder.
Awesome. Let's grab some questions up here. Our wonderful chat team wants to throw some things up. Oh, here's a good one. Do we have to know the meds that are used to treat the different disorders? I think there's a few big ones. And Selena, if you want to do these ones.
Yeah, a few big ones. This one's a little bit outdated, but the AP Psych exam really stresses this, that when it comes to bipolar disorders, a big one is lithium. It's not really too relevant to today's society, but it's on the AP exam, so you guys need to know that. And in terms of like antidepressants, maybe remember also the hormones that go into those medications, so serotonin and SSRIs and SRNIs, if I'm correct about that. And then also, I think the key therapies behind these disorders are like behavioral therapy and CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, and also exposure therapies, especially when it comes to some anxiety disorders like when you're scared, like really scared of something, like a phobia. When it comes to phobias, like exposure therapies are used very frequently. And when it comes to obviously schizophrenia and psychotic disorders, antipsychotic drugs to help with the hallucinations. Yeah, I think that's the main ones you guys need to know.
Awesome. Yeah, that's perfect. Those are great. Another awesome question that I saw popped up for a second and then disappeared is what are the difference between delusions and hallucinations? And I don't know, Selena, if you want to take that one or if you want me to answer it, totally up to you.
I'm not sure if this is correct, but delusions are more like paranoia based, and then hallucinations are you're seeing something that's not really there, like, oh, there's a dragon in this room, but it's not actually there. And then a delusion is like you're very paranoid thinking about, oh, my sister's going to like poison my food, something like that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Hallucinations are, like you said, seeing, hearing, smelling, feeling, all those descriptor words, something that isn't actually there. Whereas delusions are, yeah, like you said, false beliefs. When we have evidence that to the contrary, when we have evidence it's not the case, we still hold these false beliefs. That would be a delusion. Cool. What psychological disorders are best treated by REBT and CBT?
I believe that a lot of them are behavioral disorders simply because like REBT and CBT focus a lot on behavior. So I think the disorder groups that are most likely to be treated by those therapies are behavioral disorders and maybe anxiety disorders. Though I'm not too sure about that.
Awesome. Yeah. Behavioral and depressive disorders are typically, anxiety and depression are two very typically cited ones that CBT is used for. I saw another question again pop up for a second, then disappear. But do we need to know the difference between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2?
When I took the AP exam last year, I think there was a question on the multiple choice that asked you to differentiate. And I think it's really easy for you guys to think about it. Just remember that bipolar 1 disorder has manic episodes, and bipolar 1 disorder is more severe. And that's pretty much what you need to know.
Awesome. I think that is perfect. I see another one up there. What are the major general themes of disorders? I guess big ideas is that nurture versus nature. Nurture works on what nature endows, and those both play a role in the cause of different disorders emerging. So both our genetics and what our environmental factors are like. Another like the diathesis stress model, which I believe is in the AP Psych curriculum, but not 100% sure. Talks about how we have like a certain like level of disposition to a disorder, our diatheses, and then stress is what kind of like sets it over the edge and allows a disorder to manifest. And we have different levels for different disorders. There are some disorders that are a lot more based on genetics and some that are a lot more based off of the situations we're in. And yeah, I think those are the major ideas of disorders. Thank you so much, Selena.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you.
Cool. And last but not least, we have Unit 9, Social Psychology, which I believe I am on this one. Oh my God, me and Jenna coming back for...
I'm coming back for it.
Yay! Me and Jenna together for one last unit. What better way to wrap it up?
All right, let's do it. I'm going to let you take the lead on this. Ow! I'm going to let you take the lead on this one.
Sounds good. So the three key ideas of social psychology. The first one is the fundamental attribution error is that we tend to overestimate personal factors and ignore situational factors when explaining the behaviors of others, which is only exacerbated by in-group versus out-group. And like we talked about last night, this is one of the biggest, most important star thoughts, key ideas of all of AP psychology, is that the fundamental attribution error is we tend to overestimate personal factors and ignore situational factors. So if you guys want, you can take a second, like we did last night, drop some more examples of the fundamental attribution error in the chat. But this is one that you definitely are going to want to know for the exam.
Yeah, this one is major important. It's like one of the principles of social psych. Absolutely.
Cool. Then next there are 4 major studies and themes that that have taught us a lot about understanding human behavior within groups, but have some ethical considerations that were overlooked when they were originally ran. So the 4 big studies are Ash's conformity studies. So we can think about the lines, how in a social situation we are most likely to conform to the group consensus. We talked about how they went around in a circle, all the Confederates gave the wrong answer, and the participant who clearly knew the right answer and was clearly put off by the fact that nobody gave the right answer, still gave the incorrect answer due to the feeling the need to conform to the social situation they were in. Then we have Milgram's obedience study. If you remember, these were the shocks.
Yep.
Yeah, and this is also known as the lab coat effect. People tend to obey to authority when authority makes a request of someone. So many of the participants were willing to shock Confederates who they did not know were Confederates to a deadly level simply because an experimenter said, the study requires that you continue.
And an
They
important AP Psych social reminder is that Confederates are fake participants in our studies. So they work for the experimenter. They're kind of like actors. I don't know why we still call them Confederates, but we do. So that's what they're called.
Yeah, that'll be great to know for the research methods FRQ as well. They might ask you about Confederates. So yeah, that is Milgram's study taught us that people have a tendency to obey to authority figures, aka the lab coat effect. And just one key distinguishing factor between obedience and conformity. Conformity is we tend to conform to what the group believes, so we tend to conform to the beliefs of others around us. Obedience is we tend to obey an authority. We comply to what an authority figure has to say. So that's the difference between those two terms.
Perfect.
Then compliance is the next one. For this, we talked about the foot in the door and door in the face phenomena. So
I
foot in the
love the
door.
names of those.
Yeah, me too. So yeah, foot in the door is the idea you can make a small request before asking for a larger request. Door in the face is the flip of that. You ask for a larger request in the hopes of being granted a smaller request. Yeah, then moving on to the last one, we have Zimbardo's Stanford prison study, which talked about group dynamics. And the big overarching idea of that is that people tend to conform to the roles of a group. So the group affiliation that people were assigned in this experiment, remember it was 20 college students were divided into half prisoners, half guards. People adopted the roles of those two different groups, and that had a lot of impact with how they acted to one another. And that explains a lot of real life events, real life tragedies such as Benghazi and Abu Ghraib. Yeah, so those are big ideas of the Stanford prison study. And I guess that also leads us to people are not necessarily innately good or evil, and we're rather just a product of the situation that we're put in. And the major idea of social psychology in these 4 experiments is that we like to think that if we were put in the shoes of any of these participants, put in any of these situations, ethical or unethical, we wouldn't act in the way that many of the participants did. Yet what these reveal about human nature is that the situation plays a large factor in what we are. And Milgram's obedience explains a lot of ideas in the Holocaust. Zimbardo's prison experiment explains a lot of ideas in some tragic things that the US government has done. So those are just some big overarching ideas of those studies.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sean. All right, number 3.
And the last one is intergroup dynamics may lead to an us versus them mindset. We can adopt each social phenomena, or they explain social phenomena such as prejudice, stereotypes, social categorization, and in-group, out-group biases. So pretty much social categorization, we tend to view people through group affiliation based on arbitrary and non-arbitrary factors. We tend to, again, coming back to the us versus them mindset, we tend to see people in the in-group as us, the out-group as them. We tend to, and then tying all the way back to the fundamental attribution error, we tend to see successes of the in-group to be more related to the fact that they're good people, innately good, and have strong morals and charitable characteristics. Whereas we tend to see people as the out group when they do bad things, when they do good things to more a product of the situation. So when the out group does something good, we say, oh, they were put in a situation where they could do so. Whereas when the out group does something bad, we tend to attribute it to personal factors. They're bad people. They are moral outcasts, and other factors like that.
100%.
So
Put in the chat outgroup homogeneity, which we had talked about last night too. Like that's a perfect example. Yeah.
Yeah, outgroup homogeneity. We think everyone in the outgroup is the same. We are able to see more differences between people of the in-group.
Yeah. Somebody asked outgroup bias is the same as outgroup homogeneity, and it's not exactly the same, but it's homogeneity is a part of the outgroup bias.
Exactly. Yeah, that plays a big role in how we understand outgroups. Cool. If you want to take a second, drop in the chat which of these phenomena that we described seems the most interesting to you. But I think I'm cool to move on to the Q&A if you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
Awesome. Let's talk some social psych. All right, we just
answered that one. So outgroup Homogeneity is a part of outgroup bias, and it leads to outgroup bias, or it's a component of outgroup bias. Bing, bang, boom, done. Conformity and compliance.
Yeah, so conformity was Ash's study with the lines. Conformity is the idea that we tend to conform to a group consensus. We tend to, when everyone else in a group around us gives one answer, we're likely to conform to that answer and give the same answer. So that was what we talked about, the lines, whereas compliance, we talked about that in terms of the foot in the door and door in the face phenomenon. So I usually get them confused because they're both C words that start with the C, but those are the two big ideas of each. And
yeah,
then,
with conformity, the important thing to remember is that it's always in relation to a larger group.
and
that's how you can remember that.
let's differentiate that from obedience one more time. Obedience is to an authority figure.
I don't know if this is a delusion. Oh, a delusion is a component of the psychological disorders. So we're kind of like mixing ideas with that one. There you go.
What is the difference between self-serving bias and the fundamental attribution error? So the fundamental attribution error is, again, talking about the idea, we tend to overestimate the impact of personal factors and underestimate the impact of situational factors in relation to an outgroup, in relation to others, not just an outgroup. But we tend to see it most prevalent when we're talking about the in-group versus outgroup. Whereas, what was the second one? Self-serving bias?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure self-serving bias is we tend to try to paint ourselves in the highest light.
Yeah.
To try to make ourselves look the best, which I guess does have a lot to do with the fundamental attribution error. We try to explain our own shortcomings in terms of situational factors and our own successes in terms of personal factors. So for example,
sorry, go ahead.
For example, when you take an exam and you do really well on it, we tend to say, I studied really hard, I worked really hard, I did really well. Whereas when we do really poorly on an exam, we tend to say the class is really hard, the teacher's mean, the questions were unfair. So that's kind of the self-serving bias, which is very strongly intertwined with the fundamental attribution error, which so is everything in social psychology for the most part.
Yeah, so the easy way to differentiate those is that the fundamental attribution error is going to be corresponding to others' behavior. So we will downplay their situational factors and upplay their personal factors. And when we use the self-serving bias, it's about ourselves. So fundamental, others, self-serving, us.
Cool. Maybe we take one more and then move on.
Oh, I know.
The difference between group.
Reciprocal determinism. Is that within the social chapter, or is that within the personality chapter?
I think that's in personality.
Okay, so we'll leave that one for personality. We can try to get to it at the larger Q&A.
Cool. Then I guess our last question for today is, what's the difference between groupthink and group polarization? I'm going to try to explain it. I know these are two very tricky.
They're very similar.
Yeah, I will have Jenna clarify anything that I say that might be a little confusing. But groupthink is that we try to avoid disagreement within the group. So I believe the example we talked about is if me and all of our friends, plans finally make it out of the group chat, we're going to try to go on vacation this summer. And the whole group is like, oh, I'm going to go to Italy. And I'm like, well, I don't really want to go to Italy. I want to go to Greece. I'm not likely to bring that forward when the rest of the group agrees in an effort to preserve group harmony. So that is what groupthink is. We tend to defer to the consensus of the group, whereas group polarization is a tendency for our beliefs to get more extreme when we're within a group. So we talk a lot of times about this in political realms. So when you join a political party, you might have more mild beliefs, but as you're within join that party and really start consuming its media, your beliefs may become more and more radicalized towards the most extreme of the party, which contributes to a lot of things such as the ultimate mob mentality and ideas such as that. But I like to think of, I know a lot of times people, or you'll read in any article in the news nowadays, that the nation's become very polarized. It's become very opposite poles, very torn apart. So that's what kind of group polarization is, when you go to the most extreme, the most polarized end of it.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. You did a great job. Groupthink. You don't want to be like outcasted by your group for your differing opinions, so you form the same one. Group polarization, your opinion shift. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, we're not going over anymore right now. We are going to move on. We're going to get to talking about the exam. So if I remember correctly, I'm going to have our original Team A come down. We're going to have Sophie, Amy, and Yoongi come down for us to talk a little bit more about the AP exam. I think I'm going to be here as well, but just kind of like hiding out. Let's go. Yoongi, Amy, and Zoe, come down.
Sorry, my crowdcast just like forgot how to work for a second.
That's all right. It happens. Okay. All right. Let's take it away. Okay. First off, I think it was Zoe and I that made these doodles. I think it was Zoe and I. Yeah. Okay. We made these. Very proud of us. I'll let you continue now.
So these are statistics about the tests that I think are important to know the overview of. So the pass rate for AP Psychology, and you need a 3 to pass, that's over 60% or almost 60% of test takers. 4 and up is around 40%, and 17% is the amount that get a 5. But something that I hope is reassuring for everyone here is that 92% of people who use Fiveable will pass the AP. So you are all hopefully in the 92%. I hope you like the little doodle that we made. You know. Amy, would you like to take this slide?
Sure. So a few key tips that are important is like time management, and you're only going to have 40 seconds for each question. Remember that they all count the same, so just keep on moving through it. Okay. If you don't know an answer right away, do the guess circle, move on, and just like if you have time, get back to it, but try to answer the ones you're confident in, and try to use the elimination method whenever you can, just like crossing out the distractor answers, and see if you can use other questions on the test. This actually helps a lot. Just like if you don't know the definition of something, but you saw a question on it before and you got it right, so you can go back and look at that, and they can help you with the current question. So yeah.
So something that was in a video that I made that we didn't get to, but it was on the Cram Hub. Hopefully some people watched it. That it's important to remember to read the full question, because I remember I was showing Amy a practice question and she got it wrong because she didn't read the full question.
She's really exposing me right now.
That was shady. Oh my goodness.
She literally just threw me under the bus.
My bad. But remember to, read the entire question and read all of the answers. And remember to, if you think that you can't, I saw a lot of questions throughout the nights that ask, what do I do if I don't know the question? Like if I don't know the answers or the question, look for answers that match the unit that the question is focused on. Like if the question is asking about disorders, you can rule out the parasympathetic nervous system. So that's all part of eliminating the distractor answers. I think we can move on to the next slide. And these are some FRQ tips. Would you like to take this, Yoongi?
I would love to. All right. Remember, soda, face, order, define, apply. I've said this like 3 nights in a row, but I'm going to say it again because it is super, 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 super important. And underlining your terms can be optional, but I would suggest that you do that. So again, the professor or teacher that is jacked up on caffeine, that's read about 100 FRQs, are not like, I can't see where the term is. So be cautious of time. So if you are a person that is a planner, 10 minutes to plan, 15 minutes to answer, you're going to have 25 minutes per FRQ. Definitions are not enough to earn the point. So you're going to have a definition, you're going to have to apply that definition. And if you're if you're unconfident that you didn't hit it, make sure you have an example. That example will honestly allow you to get that, that contextualization point. And it's just going to make you feel like, okay, you know what, at least I have something that's like almost like a safety net. And annotate the prompt. So do if you need to summarize something or you need to underline something that's like, okay, this is a key point or phrase. This is something or a word I want to take in and use into my FRQ. Absolutely do that. All right.
Excellent. So here are some personal goals for you to set for yourself. You can take notes on this. You can just think about it in your head, whatever you want. So what are you hoping for tomorrow? Are you hoping to pass? Are you hoping to get a 5? And who are you accomplishing this goal for? Are you accomplishing it for yourself? Are you accomplishing it for the approval of someone else? Think about that. And what is success to you? How do you define succeeding on the AP? Do you think that getting a 5 for college credit is going to be the success that you think of? Or are you just hoping to get a passing grade for the exam?
Or are you just hoping to showcase all the knowledge that you've spent all year learning? Success
Exactly.
isn't always necessarily in a passing score, but the journey that you've taken to get there. And we've talked a lot the past couple nights about how success can be learning how to be a good scientist in the world. Success can be learning how to be a better person with some of the phenomena we talked about in social psychology. So take a minute and think about, is success always a passing grade? I couldn't use my AP credits for any class. I couldn't use my AP credits for AP Psychology. A lot of my friends couldn't use their AP credits either. So success isn't always getting a 5. Sometimes success is what we learn from the classes. Although getting a 5 does feel pretty good. So it's fun. It's a fun goal to work towards.
Another thing to think about is what have you learned from starting your learning of AP Psychology, and how has it impacted you? So I personally have learned so much about myself and what I want to pursue in the future, based on my success or not success in the class and everything that I've done. I've learned so much. Not focusing on your score. Was what you learned worth your time and effort and energy? Did you think that AP Psychology was a waste of your time? Yes, you are more than your AP test score. That's so true. That whatever you learned is enough.
And
How
whatever
can
you
I-
learned, or just with whatever you learned, if you choose to take college psychology too, will help you so much more be a leg ahead. Because Psych 101, Psych 1000, Psych 1, whatever they call it at different schools, is that's a lot of AP psychology. So if psychology is something you're interested in, or even something you just want to explore again, the knowledge that you've learned this time will help you so much. We talk about a phenomena in learning, or maybe cognitive psych, but the repetition every subsequent time you learn information, you encode it stronger, you form stronger bonds between the different neurons in your head. So what you've taken away from this class will be applicable in the future if you ever want to do another class in psychology.
I just want to say, Selena put a comment in the chat that said, it's fun knowing psych because you literally see it everywhere you go. And that's so true. That everywhere I go, like, I see something and I'm just like, oh, like, that's like the over-justification effect. Like, that, it really impacts the way that you think and the way that, you can help people understand themselves better. How can I leave the exam tomorrow with a smile on my face? Can I be proud of myself for everything that I've accomplished, not only focusing on the test score? How will I respond to difficult questions? How will you go about it? Will you stress out and start crying? Hopefully not. Will you skip them? Hopefully not. Will you utilize the techniques we have given you? Maybe. How can I use the knowledge that I've obtained in these past 5 nights and the past 7 months to succeed? How can the questions that you've asked yourself be applied to the questions that you're going to see on the test? And remember how important application is. And finally, am I proud of myself for the work that I've done so far? Am I proud of what I've accomplished in this class, in these 5 nights, tonight? We are proud of you for everything that you've done, for being here, for sticking with us through these 5 nights. We know it's been a little rough at times, but we've all gotten through it, we've persevered, and we're so happy to have made it here with you guys.
Sending psych love to all of you guys. I know I personally am proud of all of us and all the engagement we've had in the chat and the outstanding questions we've had. And I feel like just reading a lot of the comments, reading a lot of the questions, you guys are asking the right questions, you're commenting the wrong things. And I think you probably, you know the content better than you think you do. People always know the content better than they think they do. And it's really easy to get bogged down and there's so much I need to know, there's so much I need to know. But I have a feeling when you're asked to recognize it on the exam, the majority of it you only have to recognize. You don't have to recall it from memory. You only have to see it and know that this goes with this, that you'll be able to do that. And I know it's a lot to remember. I know it's a lot to think about, but I want you to know that you can all do it. And I know you can all do it. And from everyone who's been here, everyone who's sat through with their psychology class, you know more than you think you know, and you can do it.
I just want to say that I personally went through everything and I was like feeling worried. This morning I was feeling worried. I took a practice test and I did exceptionally well. You know a lot more than you think you do. When you get to the test, you're going to realize how much you know and how much you have accomplished.
Few things. Oh, go ahead.
No, go. I feel
So
bad.
a few
We're taking over
things.
your.
No, a few super important things to do tonight is go to bed. I saw too many messages in the chat. Who else is staying up till 1 a.m. today? Who else is staying up till 2 a.m. today? The answer is nobody is staying up till 2 a.m. today because, as we know, our memories are consolidated during sleep. Sleep is when our short-term memory, is when our memories are consolidated to our long-term memory. We remember what we remember because we sleep on the information. So if you go to bed at 2 a.m. this morning, you are not going to remember anything that you studied from this cram. You're not going to remember anything you studied after this cram. You're not going to remember any of it. And you're just going to be tired for the exam. So when you go to bed, if you're on the East Coast, it's 10 o'clock. Go to bed right when we hang up off this call. I know that's what I'm going to do. But go to sleep. Make sure those memories can be consolidated into your long-term memory so you're ready to retrieve them bright and early in the morning. Please, 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 please go to sleep. I know I can't force you. I know I can't like go and tuck all of you guys into bed and make sure that you don't get up and you fall asleep. And if you are going to stay up a little bit later, like spend a few minutes on TikTok or like something fun on YouTube or like watching your favorite TV show. Because if you don't know it now, probably not going to know it by 8 a.m. So rely on the knowledge that you have, everything you've accumulated, and go to sleep. Okay, so
I'm
you can take
telling
the rest of them.
I'm just telling you right now, people are gonna walk into my psych exam tomorrow and they're gonna be looking at their books. They're gonna be looking at their crash books, and my teacher's gonna be like, if you don't know it now, we're not gonna know it.
Exactly. And you don't need to know everything to get a 5 either.
You got this. Eat breakfast. Eat, please. It's going to give you energy. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. It's very important to nourish your body and give it the energy that it needs for you to succeed. Smile, because it's gonna be over so soon. And when you get out of that test, you're gonna say, thank you to myself, thank you to my friends, and you are all gonna be doing great tomorrow. And no matter what happens, you're good. Jungi's like coming and going.
I'm so sorry.
I always say the best way to walk through life is with a smile on your face. So try your best to smile through it. Don't let like hard questions bog you down. Don't let hard questions draw you back and make it harder for.
Why am I right there? No.
And it's that time of night.
Oh my goodness. What's happening?
Hold tight. What is happening? All right.
Okay, I think we're back.
Where'd I go? Oh, there.
All right.
Cool.
Well, we got to get to our Q&A. So we need to wrap this up. We want to pep talk you, but we cannot spend too much time pep talking you because we
I'm gonna
want to
speed run
get
this.
your Q&A going. So we're proud of you. We love you. We're excited for you. Take a picture of this slide because we're not going to go through it. All right. Grab your phone.
I know that we all believe in you and we all think you will succeed.
All right. We're done with cram.
We did it.
Mostly, we're going to get to our Q&A next, but you did your cram sessions. Amazing. You stuck through all 5 nights. And again, the recordings are still available for you, so you can go through those as you wish. Visit the hub for the reviews. There are practice quizzes questions that are available on Fiveable's website. So make sure you do those and then go to bed by midnight for sure. You're going to do so well. And we are here for our open Q&A. So if I could have chat team possibly sending questions up that we didn't get to, things that we have covered extensively, I do not want to answer those questions again. So if you know on our chat team that we have already covered this extensively, do not send it up, please, because those are we've already spent a lot of time on those. So let's get questions that we have not had the opportunity to ask or to answer, please. Is anybody on chat right now that can send those up? Perfect.
What would you say is the best strategy for bubbling answers? Okay, so this is what I do. I bubble as I go, but every 5 questions, I check to make sure I'm on the right line. Because there's nothing worse than getting to question 50 and realizing you're filling in bubble 49. And you don't know where you went wrong, and you don't know where you have to go back to fix it. So the questions are numbered. On the paper, I write next to the number what the letter my answer is. And then right away, I bubble it in. If I need to skip one, I start on my little Scantron bubble in sheet. And then every 5 questions, I check to make sure that the question number I'm answering matches up with the question that I'm bubbling in. So that way, worst comes to worst, there's only 5 that you have to fix. I don't know, does anyone else up here have any MCQ bubbling tips or strategies? No? Cool. Let's grab another question up here then.
Did anyone else's main screen just go black, or is that just me having tech issues again?
No, I did.
I think Jenna might have
Okay.
lost connection, but we should be. I don't think we have any more
Oh, well.
slides to present.
Yeah, we'll be fine. All right. Let's look.
Okay. I saw one pop up for a second and then disappear. Can you briefly go through Erickson again? Would one of you guys like to talk Erickson for a second?
So there are 8 Erickson stages. The first one being trust versus mistrust, which is basically just developing basic trust in infants. The second one, I believe, is, I think it's something versus shame and doubt. Is it autonomy?
Autonomy.
No, it. Okay. So autonomy versus shame and doubt is whether children are able to is like how they feel about like their parents being supportive of their you know, being, what's the word?
Independent.
Yes, thank you. Amy, would you like to continue? My brain is like,
You know,
shutting
honestly, I feel like it's okay. We don't have to run through every single one of the stages. You guys can all check out those on your own. But I think the biggest ideas of Erickson is people move through life and develop in different social categories as you grow up. And that's what he boiled down to 8 different stages with bipolar adjective pairs. And so that is what I would focus on. Then I saw something pop up. What is the difference between projection and displacement? Do any of you guys want to take that one, or do you guys want me to take it?
You can take it if you would like.
Sounds good. What displacement is? It's kind of like a defense mechanism that where you transfer like negative feelings from one person to another person or one thing to another thing. So for example, a person who is mad at their friend may scream at their family member and take the anger out on them. So that's an idea what displacement is. Whereas projection is when you attribute your own feelings or like desires or what qualities I think are the 3 to a different person, group, object, etc. For example, people often talk about bullying. So someone will like tease others for crying, but also will cry often, or will tease other people for different things when those are like their own shortcomings. So that is projection versus displacement. Awesome. Let's see. Let's grab another question up there.
Really quickly, I'm just seeing people talk about like pens, and I think my eyes grazed over a sparkly pink pen. No, bad.
No.
Black and blue. Please.
As much as I love sparkly pink.
Yes. Wonderful.
Cool.
Not for this.
Awesome. Could you possibly re-explain latent learning in the rat experiment? Does anybody want to take this one? I can also.
I can do it,
Cool.
I think. So latent learning, so the rat experiment focused on how a rat can get through a maze. And the rat, I believe was, I'm going to explain it wrong. Like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, I can think of it.
I know it's tricky to put into words. I had to take a couple minutes to think about it. So what latent learning pretty much is, it's the idea that we learn now to gain a reward later. So we can learn even if we aren't directly influenced by rewards and punishment, as long as the behavior later down the line will lead us to those rewards or those rewards. So for example, what we most often use to talk about it is a rat experiment where rats were placed into a maze and they were just allowed to run the maze. There was nothing to it. There was no like food or no reward. Whereas then later the rats were placed into the same maze with food in the middle, and the rats that had already been in the maze were able to get to the food quicker than the rats that hadn't been in the maze, which suggests that the rats were able to learn even though there was no direct reward, whereas the rats can get to the food quicker than the rats that didn't previously learn this. So that's what latent learning is. We learn now to use it later. And latent means down the line in general, if that's a good way to remember it. Then I saw another question in the chat about operational definitions. I know operational definitions we spent a lot of time talking about because they're tricky, but they probably will show up on your experimental design question. So I'll talk about, again, the 3 parts of an experiment. You have a construct, a variable, and then an operational definition. A construct is an abstract concept that you're interested in measuring. A variable is the manipulation you use to in the two different groups, it's how you measure different things. And the operational definition is how we measure, like directly measure that construct. So do one of you guys want to give us an example of a operational definition?
Sure. So we can look at anxiety and stress. And so when we measure it, we're actually measuring like the cortisol levels. And that your operational definition, it's just that unit of measurement. So you're going to state that in your FRQ, like this, I guess like patients A, B, and Z had, like we were testing stress and anxiety and their cortisone levels, we were measuring it and how high their cortisone levels were or not. So.
Yeah, exactly. Perfectly said. An operational definition is something like quantifiable, something that you can physically measure. Whereas, so yeah, like if with stress and cortisol levels would be how we're operationally defining stress. For example, with smiles, like the more you can measure happiness by numbers of smiles. So the numbers of smiles, that quantifiable factor, would be our operational definition of the abstract concept of happiness. Cool. Next, I am seeing what is habituation. So one of you guys want to do that, or do you want me to answer? Cool. I don't mind taking this one too. So habituation is a phenomenon in learning, which is the idea that there's a decrease in response to a stimulus the more and more someone is exposed to it. So yeah, the more you're exposed to a stimulus, the response will tend to decrease. That is habituation. Cool. Take maybe 1 to 2 more questions. I'm trying to scroll through the Q&A right now. There's so many of them.
I know.
My Q&A is like also broken. Like it shows a comment from March 22nd and then 4 minutes ago.
Oh my gosh. Hey, can you explain Aaron Beck's?
Aaron Beck's.
Does any of you guys want to take that one?
Okay, so I don't really think Aaron Beck is going to show up on your exam solely on the fact that you have Vibable has it in its library. It's like a list in each unit of the most important psychologists that you need to know. What if you're going to talk about Aaron, you should know that he is like the father of cognitive behavioral therapy, and did a lot of his work in like depression and how we psychopathology. Yeah. So
perfect.
But yeah,
I think
you're not
just
really gonna
I think the only thing you really might need to know is like the cognitive triad theory, like the cognitions, feelings, and emotions.
Yes, that's
Awesome.
the main one.
Okay, next question. Can you go over the brief differences between theta, delta, alpha waves? I honestly and truly don't think that this will show up on your exam, but those are just the different kinds of waves that correspond with the different levels of sleep. We talked about that the other night. I think it's also in your review packet, but I don't think they will come up on your exam. They weren't on my exam. I don't know if they were on any of your guys' exams, but they tend to not really be a point of emphasis at all. Okay, so let's do 2 more questions. So I see one right here. What is the difference between standardization, reliability, and validity? What are the different types of validity? Do you guys each want to take one? Someone want to take standardization?
I'll take standardization.
Cool, go ahead, let's hear it.
So basically, standardization is like the conformity to like standarding to like something that's standard. So it's like implementing techniques to like create like standard like parties and like ideas, I think. I feel like that made no sense.
So reliability and valid. Okay, you know what? It's
Words
late,
are hard. I've been
and
saying that all
It's
day.
all right. Reliability and validity are just measures of accuracy and consistency. So validity is accuracy, reliability is consistency. And now when we look at standardization, typically what we're referring to is like questionnaires, and they're standardized in that there's like a set of bubble options for people to fill out. And so when that happens, we have like, it's like standardized testing. It's like the AP exam. So that's what we mean by standardized. And then reliability is consistency and validity is accuracy.
you can,
And
a
then
good
for the
example of
different-
this one. Oh, sorry. I just
No,
have
go
a quick
ahead.
example. For this one, you can kind of think of it as an alarm clock that rings every single day at 7 o'clock, but it's set for 6:30. So it's reliable in the sense that it rings every day, but it's not valid because it's ringing at the wrong time.
Perfect.
And
that
then
brings
the
us to 10 o'clock. So we are done. We are thrilled to have had you with us this whole time. You are done with your night 5, and you are going to do so good on the AP test. We are so excited. You guys are just the best of luck on everything, and we've been so happy to have you all, and you guys have been great. And so much thanks to my co-hosts and my student leads here with us, and to the whole Fiveable team, and then to all of you guys who have been so active in the chat and active in your own learning, and we just really appreciate it. And you guys are going to do the best.
Thank you guys so
awesome.
much.
Thank you all
Thank
so much for spending the last few nights. Like, if it means anything, I believe in you. I think everyone up here believes in you guys to get a 5.
Don't forget
So-
that the survey is linked below the live. It's right there. Remember to fill that out. And good job.
Big breaths, go to sleep, eat something
it.
hearty and wonderful before bed. You are gonna kill it.
You
Well,
are
that's
all
the-
gonna